Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
What? How? Charles mumbled confusedly as he looked at the test results, but the confusion was quickly replaced by horror. Molly, how? What now, tell me? What can I say? This is no longer my concern. You are no longer in my life. Advise, for example, with a young wife, with the mother of your child. And you divorced me, may I remind you. Charles slumped in his chair, clutching at his hair with his fingers inserted. As if to Molly, this news was such a trifle. Divorced or not, 10 years together still meant something. Was it easy for her now, letting her seriously ill husband go to another woman? Would she, this Lara, be able to take care of him the way Molly would? Would she fight for Charles' life? Molly herself learned of her husband's diagnosis while he was on a week-long business trip. She had become adept at talking to doctors, so she went alone to get the results, and when she got them, she sat in the corridor of the oncology clinic. At first, she froze with horror, but it was not long. Soon enough, the woman began to lay out a treatment plan and think about how she would inform Charles himself. It wouldn't be easy, but let him hear everything from his wife, a loyal friend who could be supportive and reassuring. But you can't tell such news over the phone, even to a man far from home. So when Charles called in the evening and asked what the doctor had said, she calmly said, "Don't worry, everything is fine. That is, some treatment is required, but don't worry about anything. You just come back soon, Charles, I miss you." And if she knew how her dear husband would return, with whom so much has already passed, experienced for 10 years after the wedding. They were married very young, without a stake, without a yard, only with ambitions and Napoleonic plans. That is, it was Charles who made the plans. Molly was just happy to have even that dorm room, which was their first home together. But Charles was not happy. He was sure he had to do everything to make sure that his wife and the children that would someday come along wouldn't need anything. "Believe me, Molly, you will soon have everything. You will never regret marrying me." Every day he said. But with children, though, everything didn't work out as dreamed. Molly got pregnant almost immediately after the wedding, about which she informed her husband, expecting delight, but everything turned out differently. "Come on, Molly, what are we doing with kids now? Think about it. You're gonna have a baby, and what are you gonna do? Where are you gonna bring it? Where are we gonna put the crib, the stroller? Where will you prepare the formula? In the communal kitchen. Where's that fat fool, always frying fish and onions? Bathing the baby in a rusty bathtub? Understand, my dear, we don't have time for children right now. We have no right to bring the child into this dump. He will not thank us for such a start in life, especially since the improvements will be much further than we plan." Yes, everything Charles said was very logical and correct, but Molly still cried bitterly and said that it was their firstborn. It was a pity. But still her husband had to obey. The firstborn was not born, and because of this, as it turned out later, his younger brothers and sisters could not be born. But the improvements began, although there were many difficulties, but they were young, loved each other, and about children for a long time just did not think. In order that Charles could start his business, had to take a large loan, and the payment of each installment at first knocked them out of the rut, making them sometimes literally sit on bread and water, but it did not last long. Very soon Charles and his partner David went to Phil, paid off the loan, took an apartment in the mortgage, but this time such hardship and excitement was not. They knew that soon everything will be paid back. Even the fact that there was a new item of expenditure was not very worried, more worried about the result, or rather, It's absence. After 5 years of living together, Molly realized that pregnancy does not come by chance. She started going to doctors, trips to sanatoriums, examinations, treatment, IVF, other procedures ending with nothing. Molly, I am afraid that you are these treatments for non-existent diseases, not to improve your health and finally kill the body. You're not sick, but you don't get out of these doctors. Who needs it? What do you mean? Molly was surprised. Who needs our baby? Everyone keeps telling me there's still a chance. And while there is, I still do not want to give up. If in another 5 years nothing will work out, we will think about adoption. Fine, in 5 years we'll start. In the meantime, take a vacation from therapy. I'm sick of it, honestly. Yes, Molly had noticed that Charles wasn't exactly cold to her, but not without it. Yes, the passionate love that brought them together is gone, but divorce is out of the question, even though she is infertile. Yes, the husband is often not attentive, sometimes irritated, rude, often delayed at work, goes on business trips. What can you do? He's a businessman. Molly even thought about coming to work with me. But first of all, because of her early marriage, she didn't get a good education, only a sewing school. Uncomfortable somehow, the wife of a businessman, and suddenly a simple seamstress. And secondly, she was used to being a housewife. She liked it. The money that she could get, working, not the slightest importance for the budget of their family, would not have. But the time from housekeeping, work would take a lot. And she had to go to the doctors, which sometimes took days. But David, the husband's partner, also has a wife who doesn't work, and they don't have children, but it seems to be by mutual desire. David married later than Charles. His wife is Kayla, younger than Molly, and she certainly does not think about work. And she wouldn't want kids in her life either. Kayla doesn't sit at home. She's always busy, going out, parties, receptions, traveling, or shopping in the extreme case. To Molly, that lifestyle seemed wild. She didn't talk to Kayla, though she didn't judge her. Each to their own. Everything would have gone on like that. But Charles started to get a little short-tempered in the last year. At first it was nothing, not worth worrying about and paying attention to. Well, stomach aches, the most common thing for a man. At work, do not think about normal nutrition. All on the go dry food. That's your gastritis. He didn't pay much attention to it. He'd take a pill and then he'd be fine. Molly was more worried. Gastritis, but it must be treated or before you know it, and the ulcer will turn into an ulcer. How many times did she talk her husband into it? Charles, go see a doctor. I'll make an appointment for you soon. When can you do it? This week? Not this week, not next week. I don't have time to go to the doctor. You're the one who likes to be cured, and how much did those doctors help you? All they did was siphon off a lot of money. That's all they did for you. Molly saw her husband every day, so she did not see any big changes in his appearance, but once a neighbor stopped her and asked, "Why has Charles lost so much weight and his face is yellow? You'd better get him to a doctor, because these men always drag on, and then we have to deal with them." And Molly, having looked closely, aghast, and indeed, her Charles has lost weight, and looks bad, and eats not quite the same as before. But what doctors are there? Even those herbal teas that Molly had brewed couldn't be made to drink. Oh, how Molly berated herself later for not being persistent enough. She had never been able to be any kind of firm with her husband, never defended her opinion. Only when Charles himself could no longer hide anything, once grabbed his stomach and could not hold back a groan, she could not stand it. "Charles, we can't go on like this. I'm calling a doctor and we're going to start treatment right away. I can't watch you ruin yourself." Her husband's reaction frightened her even more than his moans. "Well, Cole, what can I do?" I'm not refusing. And his voice is so confused, helpless, he knows it's bad. At first, of course, called a simple district doctor from the polyclinic to do general tests that, except for referrals and those drugs that Charles and already takes, can prescribe the district doctor. But with these results, it is possible to address to a more serious specialist. More serious examinations began, and very soon the scary word oncologist was heard. So far, no one has not made a diagnosis. Just referred for examination to this specialist, but who wouldn't be scared? So what is it? Do I have cancer? Charles asked me bluntly. I'm not saying that. On the contrary, you need to be examined to rule out such a diagnosis. The doctor answered without looking up from his writing. Or to confirm it? Half affirmative, said Charles, and start the right treatment if it is confirmed. The doctor raised his eyes, looking firmly at Charles. There's no need to be afraid, even if it is cancer. It's not a verdict. Nowadays, this disease is treated, and sometimes quite successfully. Very comforting, mumbled the patient. All the way home, Molly consoled her husband, saying that nothing terrible had happened yet. Most likely he did not have any cancer. They send everyone to an oncologist to rule out all risks. I got checked out too, remember? You're gonna be fine. You'll just have to take better care of yourself. It's easy for you to say, you'll be fine, you'll live and I'll die. Charles was scared, confused, and ready for the worst. Molly was no less frightened, but her fear did not paralyze her. On the contrary, it made her mobilize all her strength. Don't be silly. First of all, it is not yet known what you are sick. And secondly, even the worst is not a verdict. You're young, you've never been sick, so stop dying before you die. By the time we got home, Charles, however, calmed down a little, cheered himself up, talked about other things. Okay, I'll give them this biopsy, and we'll see that I have nothing special, but then I swear I'll sue them all. You're scaring the hell out of me with your innuendo. And he got so calm that he didn't even wait for the biopsy results. He went on a business trip. Molly was terrified. Are you out of your mind? What kind of business trip are you going on? The usual, same as always. What's wrong now? I feel fine, and I have to go. Who's going for me? Is it you? David can't go? It's your business together. He's traveling too, he can't go. And why are you meddling in something you don't understand? Why are you always meddling, Molly? But the biopsy results haven't come back yet. Well, they will be without me. You can call me and find out. I don't think I'm gonna die of illness. I think I'm gonna die of your whining. I had the impression that Charles just couldn't wait to get away from home, from his wife, from all the doctors. Well, maybe that would actually be easier for him. He feels like a healthy man, at work among his colleagues, does not think about his illness, but at home, I remind him. And the truth is, we don't know anything yet. Maybe there's no cancer in there. He would not forget about a normal diet and medication, and I can't really help in such a situation. Molly thought, consoling herself with these thoughts. But it was still so hard on her soul, and as it turned out, not in vain. A few days later, after Charles left, the doctor called and said that the diagnosis was confirmed. Cancer, stage 4. There are metastases. It is urgent to start treatment, the result of which no one can guarantee either. Charles also called the same day, asked if the answer had come. Of course, I couldn't tell the truth. Come back soon, missed you. She herself was crying. How could she? But she quickly wiped her tears. What was the use of crying? We have to work out a treatment plan. Now the whole life will go in a different direction. And also, it was necessary to think how to tell Charles the truth more gently, carefully, and somehow to cope with the explosion of emotions that would undoubtedly follow this message. I wish he would come sooner to deal with the matter and begin the treatment. They will manage to defeat the terrible disease. They will be together for a long, long time. And so, the key turned in the lock. It came, but not alone. Yes, Charles had had a second family for a long time. He didn't realize how it came about. During one corporate party, he met a beautiful young waitress named Lara. Under the influence of alcohol and the feeling of freedom, it seemed that he fell in love and realized that she did not mind. And somehow it happened that they woke up together in her house. Yes, at first I was ashamed because for the first time I cheated on Molly, my favorite wife. And then it just sort of occurred to me. So what? I've been faithful for almost 5 years, so this one time doesn't matter at all. Molly won't find out, so it's okay, it won't happen again. She's a good girl, though, I'll give her that. I thought that everything would be limited to a one-time meeting, but somehow it turned out that they agreed on the next one. So a casual connection was reborn into a relationship, mutually pleasant and not burdensome. Lara didn't mind at all. She wanted the relationship to continue. At the same time, knowing that her new acquaintance was married, the girl did not insist on somehow strengthening her position. So she said, "You do not think, I do not want to get married. I do not even want a permanent relationship. I just like you. That's all, just like you like me. If we don't like each other, we'll just break up." Right. Well, Charles was quite happy with that arrangement. His work involved frequent, albeit short, trips around the state to neighboring cities. So the rhythm of his family life was hardly disturbed. He and his mistress lived in different parts of the city. They did not have common acquaintances, so there was no fear that his wife would find out. The fact that his business trips became a little longer, she seemed to see nothing wrong, and Charles had the opportunity, between business, to spend another day in the pleasant company of a beautiful girl, and after 3 months of such meetings, Lara announced that she was pregnant. It was an accident. She did not intend in any way to bind to herself a married lover. She was confused, discouraged by what had happened. What should I do? I'm not going to mutilate myself with abortions. Charles realized that she was right. He already knew how badly it could end for the woman because the real cause of Molly's infertility was the first abortion. You're right, Lara. It's not an option. But I can't get a divorce. I can't leave my wife. If you have the baby, I won't leave you or the baby. I'll put it in my name. I'll help you all my life, but I can't get a divorce. And please, do I need you? You can live with your wife or with your husband. Just pay alimony. Lara said, irritated. It was their first spat, and Charles thought that this would be the end of the relationship. On the one hand, it was upsetting. He was used to this cheerful beauty, but on the other hand, maybe it was for the best. Still less hassle, and do not pull this relationship forever. I'll pay money, Molly won't know, and no one will know. And I'll still have a kid. That's not a bad thing. But the spat didn't turn into a breakup. While Lara was pregnant, Charles visited her quite often, brought fruit, money, did not stay long, spent a few hours, and he became more and more attached to the girl in whom a part of himself already lived. It was so unusual, so touching. Then Gary was born. It was already a real blessing, and Charles even thought for the first time about telling Molly. But then something happened to her health. She finally realized that all attempts to get pregnant would be unsuccessful. No, it would be too cruel for a woman in that condition to talk about having a child. Charles remembered that he had initiated the termination of that first pregnancy, and the guilt called for a wife stronger than the bonds of marriage. But with Lara, things had gotten better, and so it went on. He lived in 2 houses, having already gotten used to his 2-story business trips, and the need to distribute attention and resources between 2 women. And then Lara, apparently, finally tired of such an uncertain position, or perhaps she was convinced that no one else, too, did not hurry to lead her to the wedding. And here, as if a ready family, Charles does not refuse a child, but also does not refuse his wife. Lara didn't put the question, just hinted at it. The baby's growing up. How are we going to explain to him why Daddy is so rarely home? We'll explain it somehow. All dads work. You should understand, we had an agreement. That's what we agreed, but as time goes on, we change. In any case, change, and you, as you said in the beginning, I can't, and you keep on doing it. And you don't know what you can't do. Charles really didn't know he was fine with Lara, and Molly was just as good. Besides, these Lara claims coincided with his health. Charles even thought that his illness started not from the fact that he was somehow eating wrong, but from nerves, not digesting the situation. While at Lara's house, he thought, I'd like to stay here. She makes me feel like a human being. With Molly, I feel like an invalid. She's been bothering me all day. How are you feeling? Did you take those pills and the herbal tea? Have you taken your blood pressure? Go to bed early tonight. You look tired. What do you want for breakfast, oatmeal or semolina? That kind of talk can make anyone sick. But after a few hours of living with his mistress, I was drawn home to my wife, just to her worries. Especially when my stomach started to ache, my side started to stab. The mere sight of pizza, rolls, grilled chicken, greasy cream cakes made him sick. It was all Lara's staple food, and thus Gary's. She's gonna ruin my boyfriend. I should take him away, move in with Molly, forget Lara altogether. But he realized the impossibility of that plan. That time, too, he came to Lara with the desire to rest not so much from work, from the domestic routine, from wandering around doctors' offices and clinics, from the anxieties associated with it. He was feeling quite well these days, and for some reason the anxieties had gone, as well as the pains that had already become habitual. All these doctors' forecasts were nonsense. He's healthy, that's all. He has a woman and a son growing up. What's there to be upset about, to say goodbye to life? He called his wife and she confirmed it. She found out the results of the biopsy. Everything's fine. His mood was even better. He wanted to hug and kiss Lara and Gary. Somehow he loved them very much at that moment. Lara, on the other hand, had a very different emotion. What? That was your phone call. She lost you? Come on, don't worry the woman. Go to her, kiss her, and hug her. You hear that, Gary? Your daddy's going to another aunt. He's fed up with us. Come on, Lara. Don't involve the child in this, Charles asked. Involve him in what? Why not? Your child will be going to school soon. What will he say to a question about Daddy? What about you? What did you tell me last time? Remember, I'll remind you, it's no problem. I told you that everything was about to be over, that it was about to be over. What am I saying? You've been saying that for years. I've got a big son, and you're still in the middle of a flight, or underflight, or overflight. Charles walked with big steps around the room and thought, what am I really doing? We only live once. I recently almost looked into the place where all the scenery ends. Do I have to keep pushing? You feel sorry for Molly? Yes, I do, but who's stopping you from feeling sorry for her from a distance? She still has time to find someone else and live happily ever after. and I can live with my wife and son. Maybe we can have another baby with Lara." And suddenly, he gave me a command. "That's enough. Pack your things. Let's go." "Where to?" Lara was dumbfounded. "Home is where, enough really. We have a child. What else is there to drag?" Charles took out a suitcase from the closet. "What about yours?" Already from the depths of the closet, Lara said, "Not your concern. She should understand, too. Gary, pack your toys. We're going home now. You'll have your own room there." "Isn't that great?" "Yay," the boy said, and began to pack up his stuff. "Okay, don't take too much. We'll come back and get the rest. The rent is paid until the end of the month anyway." "Housekeeping," said Lara. "You're crazy, Charles. It didn't make a noise. It didn't rattle." "You're the one who didn't make any noise or rattle?" Charles grinned. On the way home, he recovered from this momentary impulse, but it was too late to fix anything. Feeling the drilling pain inside him again, he thought, "Yeah, it's definitely from nerves. What's there to be nervous about? Let's wait to see what happens." Molly waited for her husband, prepared dinner, thought about how to inform Charles about the terrible diagnosis. When he entered the apartment not alone, but with a young woman and a child of about 5 years old in front of him. "Do we have company?" Molly asked, confused. "Why didn't you warn me?" "Guests, guests," sassy said the girl. "We are hosts, not guests. Explain to your ex, Charles, who is here. And me and Gary, we need to explore the territory. I am Madam, his favorite woman, and this boy is our son." "Yes, Molly, shall we go and talk?" Trying to be firm and decisive, Charles suggested. "And you, yes, while you look around, figure out where you will be more comfortable." He took his wife by the elbow, pushed her toward the kitchen, inhaled the smells that made his stomach ache even more. Oh, how he needed this vegetable broth, these steamed cutlets, mashed potatoes. But that's later. First, the unpleasant conversation. "You see, Molly, I should have come clean sooner, but I didn't. This Lara and I have been together for a long time. We have a son together. And you know, I brought them here to live together. They don't have a place to live. That's just the way it is." "Is this a joke? Are you crazy?" She really didn't understand anything, refused to believe what she had heard and seen. It was just unreal. "It's not a joke, and it's not crazy. I realize I'm a scoundrel, a bastard, but what can I do? We can't live here together, as you know. I won't put Lara and the baby out on the street, so you pack your things and I'll call a cab. Everything will be fine." "What route will you give the cab driver?" "I have nowhere to go." Molly realized the absurdity of the situation, but she couldn't help believing in what was happening. She was being kicked out of the house, and there seemed to be nothing she could do about it. "So it's very simple." Charles exclaimed excitedly. "There's a hotel not far away, and you can get a room and stay a few days. Until you find something more acceptable and permanent. I don't think a divorce would be difficult. We don't have children. I hope you won't be dividing up the property either. I mean, you can take what you need, your things and your dishes. Well, within reason, of course, we still have a child. Don't worry about the rest. I'll give you the money. Be careful with the money. We need something to live on. So one head is not poor, and I've saved money while I was living with you. Lara, don't interfere. It's our business." Acting like a strict husband, Charles said. Oh. The new mistress mockingly stretched out. "Coo, of course, but I have to feed the child. Go and help her pack her stuff and send it off." Charles and Molly went to pack. Again, he pulled out a dusty suitcase from somewhere, helped to shove into it the clothes of his almost already ex-wife. I could call the police right now. Molly said thoughtfully, maybe this girl will not be thrown out. She has a child, love, all the things. But no one can forbid me to be here, can they? And what do you want us all to live here together? Charles jumped up. The apartment is mostly mine. I bought it. I paid the mortgage too. You didn't work. You didn't do anything. You didn't even look after yourself. Look what you've become. What do you want now? A swap? Turn this place into a communal apartment? God forbid. I'll leave, of course, but it's enough that I'll carry everything at once. I'll come back later for what's left. I'll leave, first of all, because I hate living with you. And secondly, I'm sorry, it's not good news. The biopsy results are back. You have stage 4 cancer. There's some paperwork on your desk. Don't lose it. See a doctor as soon as possible, preferably with your wife. And I, fortunately, am now free from the duties of caring for a seriously ill person and from the spectacle of your slow decline. Molly was unbearably ashamed to speak like that. She could not escape the petty gloating that seized her, but she felt painfully sorry for Charles, who had suddenly turned gray, slumped on the sofa, clutching some rag in his hands. Are you serious? He squeezed out. More than serious. Here are the documents. Look for yourself. Go to the doctor. Without me, you are no longer in my life. She picked up her suitcase and bag, headed for the door. On the way, she looked into the kitchen, where Lara was feeding the boy Molly's food. She wished him well and left, hoping that she had managed to maintain an independent, even almost cheerful look. Only when she was in the small hotel room, alone with herself, she gave vent to tears and fully appreciated the catastrophe that had happened. Charles tried to realize what his wife had said. He picked up the documents left on the table, but he couldn't read them. Everything swam before his eyes. It was unbearable to be alone. He went into the kitchen. Did you seek him off? Lara asked cheerfully. Charles, did she always feed you this crap? Steamed, tasteless, pureed, no salt, no pepper. No wonder you're so skinny. I like it, Gary said. That's what I'm saying. It's all for toothless old men or babies. Give me your phone number. I'll at least order a pizza. What kind do you want? She took a good look at Charles and was amazed. Okay, what's wrong with your face? Are you sorry you sent her away? What are you talking about? I'm fine. Or did she say something? Scared the police, the courts? Well, you can forget about that. I'll show her the courts. Don't be discouraged either. You look like a handsomer man in a coffin. So what kind of pizza do you want? Charles shuddered at such a comparison. I don't know. I'm not hungry anyway. I'm going to lie down and rest. I'm tired. He walked out, not seeing Lara shake her head reproachfully. He wasn't going to tell his new, almost wife anything yet. If everything was as they said, she would find out soon enough, and something would happen then. Nothing good, I'm afraid. It seems that nothing good is waiting for me, and this at a time when I, you might say, for the first time believed in my happiness. I live with a beautiful woman I love. With my son, everything is good at work. I have money. To spend them on exhausting, perhaps, not bringing the result of treatment, and most importantly to spend time, not only my own. Now Lara and I have everything in common, including time. And who but me should do everything to make her life happy? But first I had to finalize the divorce. It turned out that his business partner and best friend, David, was already aware of the changes in Charles' personal life. I never realized that Molly was in contact with Kayla, David's wife. They never seemed to be friends, but it was through her that David learned of the impending divorce. Thanks for not telling me about her illness. Charles decided to keep silent for the time being, And then, as it turned out, David survived the silent disapproval after all. He didn't have to answer to anyone in such matters. The divorce really wasn't difficult. A month later, he and Molly met in court, where they formalized the end of their relationship. When Molly saw her ex-husband, she gasped, "Charles, are you in therapy? You don't look your best." "I look fine, and in general, my wife and I are doing great. How are you doing?" "Fine, too." "Well, I'm happy for you, but you should see a doctor. Don't take too long." Molly's heart really sank at the sight of her now ex-husband. It's clear he's not getting treatment, he's not dieting. But what does Molly care about that? That is, the matter may be, and there is, after all, 10 years together, relatives, you can say, just to influence now on what is happening in the life of her ex-husband. She can no longer in any way, and even if she tries, nothing good will come out of it. She will be accused of all the deadly sins. As it almost happened with Kayla and David, who turned out to be the only, if not friends, then good acquaintances, after she left her husband. Then when she left home, she found herself all alone, with no idea how to move on. Yes, Charles had given her a certain amount of money on which to live for a while, but then what to do? If she rented a hotel room, she wouldn't last long, and she didn't know what else to do. That's when she received a call from Kayla, who had learned about the treacherous deed of her husband's friend. Probably this young woman, led by the usual curiosity, or maybe she just had nothing to do. But either way, her involvement came in handy. She invited Molly to visit, promising advice, help in the current difficult situation. From Kayla, of course, what help? Charles immediately began to resent her, advising Molly to sue. The truth is on your side. Let him hang around with his scum. David was taking a more sober view of the situation. Wait, Kayla, whether you'll get rid of him or not. It's still a question, and in the meantime, Molly has to think how to live her life. Of course she does. Kayla was indignant. You'll always be on your boyfriend's side. All you men are like that. And I think I would have done the same thing myself. Throw me out the door in what I'm wearing. But I'm not Molly. You can't fight me. You'll end up with nothing. Molly, listening to Kayla's speeches, thought that soon she might be friends with this one. Lara was more suitable for her as a girlfriend than Molly. She liked David's plan better. He advised her to rent a place and get a job. Molly herself realized that it was the most suitable option. She just didn't know how to rent an apartment, how to look for a job. Years of living in a fixation on herself, her house and her husband had weaned the woman from making independent decisions. This is where David's help came in handy. Very quickly, Molly rented not an apartment, but a room in a dormitory, corresponding to her finances. The job was also quickly solved. Molly remembered her education and got a job in a sewing shop. She was hired without much willingness, still a big break in the experience, and the salary at first was unenviable. But she knew how to count money and quickly distributed her finances so that she had enough to pay for her room and to live. At first, Molly often visited Kayla and David, shared her successes and failures, and frankly, hoped to hear something about her ex-husband, about his illness. She didn't tell her friends, and she didn't ask about Charles's affairs, but David saw him almost every day. But soon the opportunity to hear about Charles in this way disappeared. One day, when David had talked to Molly and left to go about his business, Kayla suddenly asked, "Tell me honestly, Molly, did you have something with my David?" Molly was literally stunned. She did not expect such a question. "No, not now, but in general. You knew him before, as far as I know." That was true. More than 10 years ago, Molly, a graduate of the sewing school, met Charles and David, a final year student. They both went after her, and for a while Molly herself didn't know which of the guys she liked better. Yes, Charles was more persistent, and at some point it seemed to her that he loved her more, and he was the first to propose. Who knows, if David had been more active in life would have been different. But all that was before, they had forgotten how they had kissed in the park. Really, Kayla, what could have happened? They knew each other, yes, but it was nothing like that. I don't know what happened before, but now I see him looking at you like a cat at sour cream. Don't make it up, please. Why not? You're a free woman now. Maybe you've got your eye on him yourself. Kayla spoke in jest, but her eyes were prickly and serious. What are you talking about, Kayla? It never happened and never could have happened. Don't make it up. I just don't want to be in your shoes, so I think of all sorts of things. After this conversation, Molly realized that the door to this house was closed to her. Whether David was looking at her, whether Kayla's fiction and fears were real or not, it didn't matter. But Molly didn't want to inconvenience the people who had treated her kindly, and she had enough to do. Trying not to indulge in sad thoughts, Molly worked hard, improved her skills, and tried to communicate more with people. Soon she had a lot of friends. There was no time for memories of her former life, and she thought about Charles less and less. He's probably doing fine, getting better and better. His wife was young, she was not a beast, and she loved him. Why else would she wait so many years? Why not take care of the man she loves? He's her husband, her child's father. More often she thought not even about her ex-husband, but about his son, little Gary, whom she had only seen a glimpse of. Sometimes it suddenly occurred to her how good it would have been if her husband had apologized to her at once, taken the boy away from his Lara, and they would have brought him up together. What kind of nonsense was going through her head? What kind of mother would give up her child? And she, by all accounts, is not a bad mother. There is nothing to accuse her of all sins. Molly reprimanded herself. Charles was doing really well, up to a point. Immediately after his divorce from Molly, he and Lara applied for marriage, and a month later became, finally, legally husband and wife. Fancy wedding did not play, decided that the money is better spent on a wedding trip, in which they departed soon. And that's where Charles's disease, which had been hidden until then, suddenly made itself known. It is not surprising. The change of climate, unusual food and drink, increased activity. But he was in no hurry to confess his illnesses to his young wife. He limited himself to staying in the hotel room more often, much to Lara's displeasure. Like many healthy people, she did not understand the sick, and did not even believe in the existence and seriousness of diseases. Looking at her husband stretched helplessly on the bed, she said, "Charles, why are you spoiling my vacation? You are only 5 years older than me, and it seems that I married an ancient old man. You lie around all day like a turtle. Why do I have to go everywhere alone? Wouldn't you be jealous?" Charles smiled languidly and thought, "Amazing mental callousness. Doesn't she realize that I don't feel well? Wouldn't she have asked me? Suggested a pill? I would have sympathized. Molly would not leave me now. She would torture me with her questions and suggestions. Isn't it about time Lara confessed? I think it's time. I don't know if it'll work, though." But he decided to confess after his arrival. He didn't want to spoil the impression of his vacation. As a result, Charles arrived home almost alive, not even hugging Gary, who was left with the nanny. He went into the bedroom, collapsed on the unmade bed, and asked his wife to call an ambulance. "Oh, an ambulance. What's the matter with you, Charles? Is it really bad, or what?" Lara finally understood. It's bad. Charles couldn't hold back any longer. Well, bear with me. I'll get my things organized. Gary, what did we bring you as a present? What the hell is this? Can't she see anything? Dialing the number of the ambulance myself, I thought, Charles, this is how I'll die, and no one will give me a glass of water. The arrival of the doctors was an unpleasant surprise for Lara, who had not yet unpacked her things. She did not even come out to the patient, did not ask what was wrong with her husband, but she heard the doctors leaving. Charles was not hospitalized, only administered painkillers. As you can imagine, no ambulance or on-call hospital will treat something like this. Just go to your oncologist so you can get the treatment you need faster. After closing the door behind the doctor, Lara rushed to her husband. Why did he say oncologist? Do you have that one? She did not dare even to say the name of the disease aloud. Finally, she believed that I wasn't fooling around. Charles thought grimly and confessed, I have cancer. I don't know how long I'll live, but the doctors say. So that's what it is. Lara said ominously. That's why your purse so uncomplainingly slipped away. She left me not a husband, but a wreck. She herself was used to the fullest, and now I have to nurse a sick man. What a clever idea. Well done. What are you talking about, Lara? Charles asked pitifully. What are you talking about? About the birds. You heard everything perfectly well and understand everything better than I do. You didn't need Lara when you were healthy, and now you're taking it out on me? God, why did I do it? I waited 5 years for you to turn me from a mistress into a wife. I gave birth to your son, and now I've got it. Who came up with that? You or her, Molly, your Molly? If she did, I see. Oh, clever, clever woman. Don't be like that. She had nothing to do with it. She lived for 10 years with a healthy man who provided for her to the fullest, didn't work, didn't give birth to children, lived for herself in pleasure. And when her husband got sick, she immediately made a run for it. I wonder why she leaves so quietly, not a tear, not a reproach. Why should she cry? She should be kissing my hands, dancing with joy. Don't be silly, she didn't know anything. She's a decent woman, she didn't want to hurt anyone. Of course, an angel in the flesh. She didn't leave you sick. No, she was kind. She gave you to me. Lara's a fool. Let her take the pots out while the angel Molly lives on her own, spending your money. How much did you give her? I didn't give her anything. Calm down. Charles tried not to get nervous, not to raise his voice. He knew that it might bring back the pain, but Lara continued to ravage, not even distracted by Gary. But what's it to you? Shouted she at the child. Why are you swearing? What's the matter with Daddy? Daddy, are you sick? Do not be afraid, baby. Everything is fine. Only you do not cry. I'm just tired. Charles tried to calm the child down. Yeah, tired. Your daddy's tired of defending other people's aunts and lying to your mom. It's not enough for you, you little bastard. Now she has to go after your daddy. Get out of here. Don't listen to adult conversations or I'll rip your ears off. Lara, don't take it out on the kid. I'll take care of my soul, but leave him alone. But where was it? That day, everybody got it in for everyone. And the next day, Charles went to give himself up to the doctors. He was glad to be in the hospital, to be honest. There was no hope that Lara would calm down. Gary felt sorry for her, of course, but maybe she wouldn't yell at him when she was alone. A trip to the doctor's office, however, dashed that last hope. Charles was not even offered hospitalization. After the examination, it turned out that the disease is already seriously neglected. I was not hospitalized, although they prescribed treatment, and I had to go to various procedures. It did not give much relief, but something had to be done, and his condition was worsening. Charles was getting weaker, not by days but by hours. He lost interest in his surroundings, almost did not pay attention to his wife and child. At the next appointment, the doctor directly said that nothing more could be done. He only needed to ensure a dignified departure from life. Charles was ready for this. Moreover, he himself realized that his days were numbered, but it was very difficult to hear the confirmation. The only thing I can suggest is a palliative care unit and then perhaps a hospice, although there are some difficulties with placement there. Okay, it might be a lifesaver for me or my loved ones, but not right now. I need to get my affairs in order. Of course, that is, do as you please, said the doctor. Well, that's it. I've got a one-way ticket. All I can do is pray that it's not too hard to leave. Too bad I'm an atheist, Charles thought as he walked home. Lara, already realizing that her husband was in a bad way, insisted that he should go to a hospital or something. She couldn't bear to take care of a sick man. But there were no places to go, and Charles didn't want to go anywhere. This, of course, meant listening to his wife's constant accusations of selfishness, moaning about her ruined life, cursing her fate. And one day, exhausted from the endless care of her husband and child, the young woman could not stand it. In the evening, having put her son to bed, having given her husband an anesthetic injection, she packed up and left, forever. Waking up, Charles first waited for her, then became worried, walked around the apartment. On the dressing table, he saw a piece of paper with the single word "gone." Checked it, there was no money, no jewelry, no Lara's most prized possessions. "Dad, when is Mom coming?" Came the voice of his son behind him. The boy stood still, not dressed, rubbing his eyes with his fists. "I don't know, kid. You go and get dressed, okay? I'll make you something to eat." "What would you like?" "I don't know, for Mommy to come. There's cookies in there. I'll get them myself. Are you all right?" "Not quite, but I can make something." "You don't have to eat cookies in the morning, okay?" "My mom lets me. Is she sick too?" It was obvious that Gary was trying not to cry, but the near tears were already trembling in his eyes. "No, what are you? She'll be here soon, healthy and cheerful." Even this short conversation was tiring Charles, and he had to feed the child something else. He hadn't been hungry for a long time. He could hardly swallow any semi-liquid food in very small quantities. Well, he couldn't do it on his own, and Lara didn't seem to be coming back. Her leaving me was understandable. She'd been ready to do it for a long time, but the baby, how could she leave her son to a man who could die at any moment? Charles tormented himself with the thought. He realized that he would not be able to prepare anything for Gary, let him eat cookies with milk, and fell on the bed. He had to find the strength to call someone, but who? No one but David. They still need to settle the matter, with Charles part of the business. David, having barely heard of Charles' predicament, had come at once. Charles sold his half of the business to a friend, put some of the money into his son's account, and left the rest for medical treatment and a nurse. David helped with that too, quickly finding an elderly woman with a medical degree. She agreed to take care of both the patient and the child. "And you know, David, I want to call Molly, not for help, but for forgiveness. It's time for me to say goodbye to people, you know." "Don't mind, you know." "Call her, sure." David approved of the idea. "I haven't talked to her in a while. I think she and Kayla had a falling out. You know, that pretty girl will say mean things to anyone, but I think her phone number is the same. So call her. You need to talk to her, of course. I'm sorry, but what you did was really stupid. I realize that myself, so I want to correct my mistakes." David waited for the nurse to arrive, clarified all the questions with her, told her about her duties and the peculiarities of caring for the patient. Charles, calmed down by the injection and the fact that the most urgent problems were somehow settled, fell asleep. He decided to call Molly tomorrow. This day was too exhausted by the few actions and heavy experiences that there was no strength anyway. He was well aware that there might not be any tomorrow, but there was no strength to overcome the drowsiness that overcame him after the injection. Molly, meanwhile, was living her life and was quite content with it. She successfully worked at the sewing factory, where she found a lot of new, good friends, and even wondered how she had managed to live differently before. It was not to say that she did not remember Charles at all. She did, and often worried about his health. Comforting herself with the thought that he was living well, undergoing treatment. After all, if something really serious had happened to him, she would have been informed. Even though she was his ex-wife, but she was his wife. They had lived together for 10 years. She tried to call her ex-husband herself, but to no avail. Apparently, he changed his cell phone. Molly hadn't spoken to David or Kayla, so she couldn't ask them anything. And even if she could, she wouldn't. If she did, they'd think she was counting on the past to come back, which it wasn't. If Charles had even called her and offered to go back, to start over, she would have refused. She was satisfied with her present life. And suddenly he called. "Molly? I'm sorry I haven't called. I haven't had time. I mostly just wanted to apologize to you." "Yeah, I'm sorry. It's time to take stock." "Summarize what?" Molly was scared. "Are you not feeling well at all, Charles?" "Yes, Molly, it's my own fault. I neglected my health and, well, you know what I mean. The doctors won't even give me treatment. They say it's useless. Well, I mean, they do help. But, well, my song is over." "God, Charles, what a horror. What are you saying?" "Is there nothing? Molly, we're done talking about this. I know I'm sorry for what I did to you, and it's probably stupid to apologize, but don't curse me too much." "Yeah, what are you talking about? When have I ever cursed you?" Molly felt a cold wave roll down her spine. She believed Charles' words immediately. "Yeah, well, what else was there to expect? He's sick, he's dying, her Charles." No matter how their lives ended, she remembered the good things. She remembered him young, handsome, strong, and loving. "What can I do for you, Charles? Tell me. I mean, I'm sorry, of course, your wife? There's no wife anymore. Lara left me." "Oh my God! And Gary, you can't see him either?" "Gary, I can see him just fine. He's with me. She left him too." Charles sighed. "Where did she leave the baby?" "All right, never mind. But how do you live there?" Molly squinted at the abundance of unpleasant news. "We have a nurse, a very good one. She's a nurse by training with a lot of experience, helps me. I don't really suffer much, except mentally. I don't know, maybe leaving won't be too hard. Would you mind seeing me one last time?" Well, of course, Charles. Are you home? Why don't I come over right now?" "That would be very nice, Molly. I'd be so grateful to you for that." "Oh, come on. What gratitude?" "I'm coming over. Do you want me to bring anything?" "No, you don't need to bring anything. I've got everything." "I don't need anything, just to see you." "I'll be there." "I'll call a cab. I'll be there in an hour." "Wait for me. Molly's in a hurry. I'm really waiting." The woman hung up the phone and scurried around her room. The apartment was empty now. She didn't have many neighbors. An old woman whose children had taken her to a country house, and a couple who were not very old. The husband and wife, who at this moment were at work. Molly had the day off this day. She rushed to the closet to pick out clothes, then waved goodbye. She wasn't going on a date, and how she looked didn't matter. Oh my God, Charles. Charles is mine, dying. What can we do? There's nothing we can do. Just don't upset him anymore. Molly hurriedly dressed and cleaned herself up, and then the doorbell rang. Who could it be? With annoyance, she thought, opened the door. The neighbor from the first floor, a bitter drunk. He often went to all the apartments, came to Molly and borrowed money. Molly never gave. She knew perfectly well that such people, once you give them as if in a loan, they will not return it, but they will consider that you are obliged to give them money for drinks always. She wasn't going to give them anything now either. Molly, what are you doing? Breathing a little booze, older man. I would never, but tonight I have to. I'm so happy because my eldest is back. He came from the zone. He was released early, of course. For good behavior. I wish he'd behaved like that at home. But we started celebrating 3 days ago. But we were celebrating, and then we ran out of money. But now we won't be short of money. James is going to work, and so am I. We'll give it to you. Don't you doubt it. I'll give it to you like a bayonet. No, I got it. Go on, Bob. Molly tried to close the door, but the drunk had a grip on the door jamb. Molly, be a human being. Her roommate urged her on. I'm not just asking you to do this. I'm telling you I have joy. Well, what are you completely without sympathy, or what? She seems to be a good woman, a beautiful woman, and she's going somewhere, on a date apparently. It was impossible to bear it, but she couldn't fight with that alcoholic. All right, but it's only once, remember. Don't come back. I have no time to argue with you now. I have a sick relative to visit. She, without looking, pulled out of her purse some bill, slipped it to him. And that's good for you. It's a holy thing to visit a sick person. We'll drink to his health, and to you, and to everything. The man's eyes greedily dug into the purse. In Molly's hands, he saw perfectly well that there were still a lot of papers there. Why are you squirming, as if you were giving the last one? You've got a lot there, he said rudely. You could have given me more. We don't need one bottle. We each need 2. Go away. Molly slammed her purse shut, put it away, and then a rough hand grabbed her purse. Come on, you fool. I told you I'll pay you back. We'll pay you back. It's a sin to be greedy for something like this. Stop it, you rascal. Molly shouted, snatching the bag from his hands. But where was she to fight the still strong man, who also needed a drink? He was not going to give up such a prey. He pulled the bag to himself, pushed Molly, and not calculating the forces, she fell, hitting her head on the nightstand. Oh, you! The neighbor spoke up. That's what greed leads to. Why are you lying there? Yeah, she passed out, but that's okay. The man grabbed his bag, took out his purse, moved Molly. She did not react. Or did she just die? Come on, women people are resilient people, would have given immediately and would be alive and well, muttered the neighbor, running away with the booty. Molly was left lying there with blood under her head. Luckily, the neighbors came home from work, saw what had happened, and called an ambulance. Molly was taken to the hospital with a severe concussion and serious injury. Charles waited for Molly for several hours, but she never showed up. He tried to call back, but the ex-wife did not pick up the phone. Well, it's all clear. At first she promised, but then she sat and thought about it and decided there was no need to poison her soul. Fair enough. What can I say? Well, at least we talked on the phone. Thanks for that. I think it's him. The patient's condition steadily worsened, and the next day He asked the nurse to call David and ask him to come over. I couldn't even pick up the phone. He's not feeling well. Come over soon. Maybe you'll catch him. He probably wants to say goodbye or make some arrangements. And then there's Gary. I'm afraid I'll frighten the child. The old woman could hardly hold back her tears. Gary didn't quite understand what was going on with his father, but he felt something very bad was coming. Aunt Clara, why are you crying? Is Daddy sick again? He asked the nurse. Yes, baby, it's bad, but don't worry, everything will get better. She didn't know how to calm the child. She saw that words were powerless. Moreover, his father was the only relative for the boy. David came, listened to the last orders of his friend. Fortunately, even before Charles finally fell asleep, they had time to solve the business, and most importantly, Charles had filed a divorce from Lara and deprived her of her maternal rights because she never showed up. David, I feel sorry for Gary. He's got no one. I don't want him to grow up in an orphanage. The dying man whispered. Don't worry, Charles. I'm not leaving the boy. I've got no kids of my own. I'm raising this one with Kayla. She won't mind. They're talking about kids themselves. David doubted his wife would be okay with a stranger's kid, but he was sure she wouldn't protest. Thank you, friend. The dying man squeezed David's hand with cold fingers. A couple days later, Charles was gone. No one knew where Lara was. They tried to report Molly's funeral, but her phone was still off. None of the ex-wives were at the funeral. David kept his promise and took Gary back to his place, causing Kayla's expected displeasure. But really great. I didn't raise other people's kids. No one expects you to do that. You're an educator, you know that. Just be nice to Gary. Don't show your displeasure. You didn't want your own. Don't want other people's kids. I want my baby, okay? Yeah, please, I don't mind. You're pouting, Kayla. It's just that Gary has a mother, and we're not involved. He doesn't have a mother. She's gone. She's disenfranchised. And we're done talking about this, okay? Kayla had to accept it. She was afraid to cross her husband. She depended on him for everything. Her well-being, her ability to attend events, to travel several times a year. In a divorce, she would be left with nothing. And lately, it was felt that David was not satisfied with their family life. Having children of her own she didn't want, and now she couldn't have any more. So there was nothing to count on in a divorce. Going back to her parents? It was scary to think about it. They had to accept the arrival of a stranger's baby in their home. Molly was in the hospital for a month. When she came to her senses, she immediately thought, Charles, but she couldn't remember what was wrong with Charles. At first it seemed to her that they were not divorced, they lived together. Her husband was waiting for her somewhere and she didn't immediately remember what had happened. She only told the policeman about some scary man who pushed her. However, the neighbor was found out right away. He wasn't even leaning. Molly remembered where she was going before the accident, but it turned out that her phone was also missing. The neighbor admitted that he had stolen the phone, but had given it to his son, and he had gone somewhere else. The patient's condition steadily worsened, and the next day, he asked the nurse to call David and ask him to come over. I couldn't even pick up the phone. He's not feeling well. Come over soon. Maybe you'll catch him. He probably wants to say goodbye or make some arrangements. And then there's Gary. I'm afraid I'll frighten the child. The old woman could hardly hold back her tears. Gary didn't quite understand what was going on with his father, but he felt something very bad was coming. Aunt Clara, why are you crying? Is Daddy sick again? He asked the nurse. Yes, baby, it's bad, but don't worry, everything will get better. She didn't know how to calm the child. She saw that words were powerless. Moreover, his father was the only relative for the boy. David came, listened to the last orders of his friend. Fortunately, even before Charles finally fell asleep, they had time to solve the business, and most importantly, Charles had filed a divorce from Lara and deprived her of her maternal rights because she never showed up. David, I feel sorry for Gary. He's got no one. I don't want him to grow up in an orphanage. The dying man whispered. Don't worry, Charles. I'm not leaving the boy. I've got no kids of my own. I'm raising this one with Kayla. She won't mind. They're talking about kids themselves. David doubted his wife would be okay with a stranger's kid, but he was sure she wouldn't protest. Thank you, friend. The dying man squeezed David's hand with cold fingers. A couple days later, Charles was gone. No one knew where Lara was. They tried to report Molly's funeral, but her phone was still off. None of the ex-wives were at the funeral. David kept his promise and took Gary back to his place, causing Kayla's expected displeasure. But really great. I didn't raise other people's kids. No one expects you to do that. You're an educator, you know that. Just be nice to Gary. Don't show your displeasure. You didn't want your own. Don't want other people's kids. I want my baby, okay? Yeah, please, I don't mind. You're pouting, Kayla. It's just that Gary has a mother, and we're not involved. He doesn't have a mother. She's gone. She's disenfranchised. And we're done talking about this, okay? Kayla had to accept it. She was afraid to cross her husband. She depended on him for everything. Her well-being, her ability to attend events, to travel several times a year. In a divorce, she would be left with nothing, and lately, it was felt that David was not satisfied with their family life. Having children of her own she didn't want, and now she couldn't have any more. So there was nothing to count on in a divorce. Going back to her parents, it was scary to think about it. They had to accept the arrival of a stranger's baby in their home. Molly was in the hospital for a month. When she came to her senses, she immediately thought, Charles, but she couldn't remember what was wrong with Charles. At first it seemed to her that they were not divorced, they lived together. Her husband was waiting for her somewhere, and she didn't immediately remember what had happened. She only told the policeman about some scary man who pushed her. However, the neighbor was found out right away. He wasn't even leaning. Molly remembered where she was going before the accident, but it turned out that her phone was also missing. The neighbor admitted that he had stolen the phone, but had given it to his son, and he had gone somewhere else. And Molly, she couldn't remember any numbers, not Charles, or at least David. Her friends often visited her, but they couldn't help her. All she could do was hope for a speedy discharge. Even if she couldn't find a room, she could just visit Charles. Poor guy, how is he? What does he think of me? That I was scared, didn't want to see him sick. Molly didn't know that her ex-husband had already been buried. She rushed the doctors to discharge him, but they told her, no, it's the head. You have a serious injury. You don't want to end up severely disabled, do you? Molly didn't want that at all, so she faithfully followed all the instructions, hoping that the injury would not have such serious consequences. At David's house, meanwhile, other events were unfolding. Kayla, having accepted that Gary would now live in their house, nevertheless did not give up hope of getting rid of the child. The only way to do that was to find Lara. Whether she was disenfranchised or not, she was still the birth mother. Her rights can be restored. She's a normal woman. She doesn't drink. But why did she run away? So nerves couldn't stand it. Her husband was dying. Who could put up with that? She and Lara did not become friends, but still some contacts with mutual acquaintances remained. Not without difficulty. Kayla managed to contact the fugitive and tell her that Charles had died. Really so soon? The young widow was surprised. I didn't know. What about the inheritance? And that if you expect to get something, you must hurry. I don't know how possible it is. Charles had time to divorce you, but the child is still there, and no one can deprive him of anything. It's true, you've been disenfranchised. What? Why would I do that? Where is he now, Gary, with you? Well, I'll come and get him. He's registered in the apartment, and I'll live there with him. I'm the birth mother. I was wrongfully deprived of my rights. I can prove that. Is the apartment intact? It's a good thing Molly didn't show up to claim it. And thank you, Kayla, for at least letting me know. Now I'm going to come over and let anyone try to say a word. Lara really didn't hesitate and soon arrived. Kayla met her. David was at work. The women met like best friends. Gary, hearing his mom's voice from the room, jumped out and rushed over to her. Mommy, you came and our daddy is gone. We'll come home with you, won't we? Really, my sunshine, really, chicken. Mommy will never leave you again. You love me, don't you? Lara was pretending to be so sweet. Can't we wait for David? He's responsible for the baby? I don't care what he's responsible for. I'm the mother, not him. Oh, I don't have the key to the apartment. Well, we do. Kayla pulled out a bunch of keys. Well, fine. Tell your David that Gary and I went home and he doesn't have to worry anymore. You mean he'll drop off the paperwork later? I've got to get my pension and stuff, and I'll figure it out later. Gary, what are you standing there for? Pack your things and let's go. You want to go home? Yes, but do you want to come back here? Uncle David is a good man. He promised to be my daddy. We'll find you a better dad than any David. Get ready, I said. Kayla, can you lend me a big bag? Both women began to pack in a hurry. They wanted to get there before David arrived. They knew he'd be against Gary being taken away, even by his own mother. We made it. Kayla was ready to sing and dance when the door closed behind Lara and Gary. At last, they would be living alone together again, without that sullen, whiny, unsociable child. She had tried sincerely to get along with him and Gary and the cute, on, candy, on toy, and he still turned his nose up at her. Lara's right. Don't listen to David. Oh, how can a child survive such a tragedy? You're a great teacher. What kind of tragedy can there be with these bedbugs at 5 years old? He lives on his own. No one hurts him. He's well fed. What's the tragedy? He understands a lot. His father died. He didn't die. On Joy, Kayla opened a bottle of wine to celebrate the release, but also to give herself courage to talk to David, who, of course, will express dissatisfaction when he learns about what happened. David was, of course, displeased by his wife's behavior, or rather, indignant to the core. How could you give the child away, Kayla? We are responsible for him. How could I not? Kayla snapped at him, having gained courage. And besides, who did I give it to, gypsies or something? Lara is his own mother. She has the right. You should have seen how the boy rushed to her. I couldn't tear him away by force. He was already looking at me like a wolf. And it's easy for you to be responsible when you're away all day, and I'm here to take care of him. Yeah, you've had it up to here. That's right. The kid doesn't belong with you. I mean you with him. You're drunk in the middle of the day. What kind of person are you? What kind of woman are you? You used to be a normal girl. Now you've become an evil, useless woman. David looked at his wife squeamishly. David, what are you doing? Kayla mumbled fearfully, suddenly realizing that she had gone too far in her actions and words. Do you want to go together and pick up Gary? I miss him too. Lara went over there to their apartment. That's why I gave her the keys, so she wouldn't go anywhere. Let's go. Come on, David. What a lying, insolent bitch you are. David replied with disgust. I'm not going anywhere with you. I don't even want to see you. David. Kayla howled pitifully. She went to her husband, but he went into the room he had set up as his office and slammed the door shut. Ignoring his wife's whimpering in the hallway, he dialed Lara's number. Lara, are you home? Gary with you? He asked in a decisive tone. Yes, we're home. Gary is with me and with his new father, but it's none of your business. Stay out of our lives, the woman replied cheekily. Remember one thing. You can't be in Gary's and my life. You're nothing to the boy now. You have no right to be in this apartment, much less this new father. Tell him that. If you don't want any serious problems, tomorrow morning, clear the place out, and I'll come get Gary. We'll see which one of us gets in trouble, Lara shouted. But David did not continue the argument and hung up the phone. I hope nothing happens to Gary until tomorrow. I'll go there in the morning with all the documents and, if necessary, with the police. Hoping at first to settle the matter amicably, I set off alone the next morning. And at Charles' house, I met Molly. She was coming out of the front door in tears. Molly, exclaimed the astonished David, how are you here? Where have you been? Why couldn't we find you? David, how could we? Charles is really gone. Sobbing, Molly asked. Yes, she had just been discharged from the hospital yesterday, having undergone all the necessary examinations and recommendations that would allow her to avoid the consequences of a rather serious trauma. One of the conditions was to avoid stress. It's funny how people follow that advice. Molly went home from the hospital to a rented apartment. Neighbors visited her, said the room was left behind, nothing to worry about. Indeed, the room remained locked. Molly had locked it that day on her way to see Charles. This time she decided to take her time, to tidy up, take a break from her long stay in the hospital. The neighbor's grandmother greeted her like family. Molly, we were so worried about you. And Bob, that thug, they took him away. He's not just you. He's got a lot of complaints against him. God gave the neighbors, the whole family's like that. The son gets out of jail, the father goes to jail, and then it's the other way around. You rest, sweetheart, wash up, wash off the hospital smell, and I'll make you a nice cup of tea. Thank you, Cindy. Tell me, has anyone come to see me? Your girls from work came by to tell me what's going on. And no, there was no one else. Well, if there was something to tell, they would have found me. Molly decided and didn't go to Charles until the next morning. Lara opened the door, strangely enough. Charles had said she'd gone away. Well, she's back, so she must have a conscience. Hello, I'd like to see Charles, Molly asked. Lara, with a strange expression on her face, looked her over from head to toe. Hello, why would you want to see Charles? She asked with a slight sneer. Only you're too late, my dear predecessor. There is no Charles. He was buried almost a month ago. He died? So soon? Molly gasped, slumping her shoulder against the jamb. Why wait? As if she didn't know he'd been sick for a long time. But don't worry, even if you grabbed it right away, you wouldn't have gotten anything. Gary and I are the first heirs, and you're not even in the picture. Ex-wife is nobody. A tall young guy appeared from the back of the apartment. Lara, are you holding the door open? It's drafty. Oh, good afternoon. I'd like to invite a charming guest into the house. Good day to you. Angrily threw Lara, Molly, and slightly pushed her away, slammed the door, But Molly was no longer interested in the girl's words, nor in the sounds of some altercation from behind the closed door. There was a pounding in her head. Charles was dead. Charles was dead, and she hadn't even said goodbye to him, and he'd been waiting and maybe looking at the door until the last minute, hoping she'd come. She stood like that for a few minutes, not noticing the tears running down her cheeks. Then she wiped her face, walked out of the front door, and ran right into David. "Yes, Molly, they buried him, alas. They've been trying to reach you, but your phone's not answering. Why don't we sit down, calm down, and then we'll go to the cemetery. 40 days soon. Have you been to the apartment?" David asked. "No, I called. Lara opened the door. I told her, that's all." "Have you seen the boy, Gary?" The man was worried. "No, there was some stranger there. A new husband or something. Lara, that one. I've decided to take Gary for myself, under guardianship for the time being, and then adopt him. He stayed with us after the funeral. I don't know how Lara got wind of it, but she showed up yesterday while I was out and took him away, and Kayla gave him to me, the bitch. I wouldn't be surprised if she told Lara too. She doesn't want the baby, that's how it is. I think I'm gonna divorce her, because I'm gonna take Gary anyway, and why would a kid want to live with someone who doesn't love him? And then divorce, grab, run. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just not really comfortable with divorce, for obvious reasons. Charles wanted to see me, he called me. She told David the circumstances under which she was injured. Dan drunk, because Charles probably thought I just changed my mind, and now he won't find out. Who knows? Maybe he really does see and know everything now. I should take his son. I promised him I wouldn't leave him, especially not with Lara and her boyfriend. Will you come with me? Molly could see that David wanted her to come for some reason, and she herself was not indifferent to the fate of the child, who was taken away by a cuckoo mother who lived with some strange guy. We went upstairs, called the apartment again. What the hell is this? Are we going to get some peace today or not? Lara screamed before she could open the door. When Molly and David saw her, she started on an even higher note. What? Are you bringing a cheerleader? It's not gonna help you. Oh, David, is that who else is here? Stop it, Lara. Give me Gary and the keys and get out of here. David said firmly, don't get the police involved. What else do you want? You're so clever. The woman was first, but David stopped her. Enough already. Don't bring the police into this. You have no rights, not to the apartment, not to the child. Gary, are you there? Let go, you fool. The boy shouted from the room. Gary jumped out of the room and ran to David. Uncle David, take me away. I don't want to live with that Thomas. Thomas, I told you to hold the bastard. Gary, come here. Don't you want to live with Mommy? Lara screamed at the kid. I want to live with you, but I won't live with him. He says I've got an extra mouth and I should be turned in, cried the baby. Thomas himself appeared from the room, a guy of about 20 years old. He paid almost no attention to the newcomers and immediately attacked Lara. What's that supposed to mean? You said that the apartment is yours, and here in the morning, some hordes are walking around and even threatening the police. That's all you need. It's mine, it's mine. The woman stomped her foot. All right, Lara, stop it. David cut her off. You know perfectly well that you have nothing to do with this apartment, as well as with the child. You'll have to attract young lovers by some other virtues, before you lose them. Pack up, and you, young man too. Let's skip the police. We don't have time for that, and we don't want to scare the baby. That's what the man says. Lara, you've been talking for nothing. both about the apartment and the money. You've been lying." "That's it, man. I'm leaving." "I don't need to be fighting over other people's apartments." "Thomas, where you going?" "I'm not leaving. My son is registered here. I have to live with him." Lara tried to shake her rights, realizing that she was about to lose everything, but David finally interrupted her speech. Seeing that her lover was really going to leave, Lara clung to him and begged him to wait until she was ready. Scattering curses at David, Molly, and the baby at the same time, she quickly gathered herself and quickly ran to catch up with her young man, ignoring even the timid mommy uttered by Gary sitting in Uncle David's arms. As the door slammed shut, he cried pitifully, "I'm not going to have a mommy again." He sobbed. "Don't cry, baby," gently said Molly, and took him out of David's arms. "Tell me, have you eaten better today?" "Not yet," they said later. "And yesterday?" Molly wrinkled painfully at the sad hair, that little man. "Yesterday I ate a bun. They also gave me fish, but it was very salty, and today there's nothing there." "All right, let's go back to my place." She left the keys, here they are, but never mind, we'll have to change the lock anyway, just in case. "Let's go back to my place now." "Molly, do you want to go too, or do you want to stay here?" Molly stood on the doorstep of the room where her Charles had spent his last days. No, I'm not staying here." Wiping her tears again, Molly said, "And I have no right to, either. I'll go to my place. I'm renting a room. Why don't you want to come with us?" "Let's go." David encouraged her. "But why not? Kayla is there, and she, has a special attitude towards me." She waved her hand. "You don't have to think about Kayla. Bygone's Kayla, I think it's serious." David frowned. "What? Aunt Kayla won't be there either?" Gary guessed. "That's good. I didn't like her very much either. Why is it that if Uncle is good, Auntie is bad? And if Mommy's good, she has some Thomas who's bad? Auntie, do you have a bad husband too?" Molly smiled. "Get your stuff together, why don't you?" "No, I don't have any husband, not anymore. I must be bad." "No, you seem nice." "All right, I'm packed. What if Mom comes? She'll know where she is, right?" "Of course she will." I patted him on the head. She was at my place. If she's going to be without Thomas, I'd go with her. Gary promised sadly. "Will you come with us, Aunt Molly?" "No, honey, I won't. But we'll see each other again. Don't be sad. Aunt Kayla's waiting for you. She's not bad at all, you'll see. And David, call me when you go to the cemetery. I'd really like to visit Charles' grave." She whispered quietly to David. He promised to call and pick her up. "Get in the car. Can I at least give you a ride home?" he said. Molly agreed, since getting on public transportation would be too long, and she felt quite exhausted by the events of the morning. On the way home, she marveled that the pinch of sadness from the news of Charles's death had been replaced by a light sadness. Maybe she had Gary to thank for that, as he fiddled with some toy, talking to her or to one of the adults. After all, he could have been my son. With a smile, she thought. David was thoughtful too, but not sad, but rather preoccupied, thinking about his upcoming meeting with Kayla and his separation from Molly. Yes, once he and Charles had both been in love with this girl, but she had chosen Charles, and in David's heart there was still the regret of unfulfilled love. Yes, he had other women, he had a wife, but the feeling of such strength that he had felt for Molly was not repeated. And now he was thinking that Charles' death would probably change a lot of things in their lives, but they said goodbye at Molly's house as friends, promising each other and Gary that they would meet again many times. Kayla greeted her husband and boy with fake joy, trying to atone for the harsh words she had spoken earlier. She threw her arms around Gary, telling him how glad she was, how much she missed him. The boy smiled politely but pulled away. "You should have fed him and then hugged him." Disgruntled, David said. Kayla led the boy into the kitchen, asking him what was up with his mom, where she had gone, and why. Gary livened up a little, talking about his life with his mom and how Uncle David had kicked her and that nasty Thomas out. But suddenly he mentioned that Aunt Molly was with them. Kayla immediately flared up, ran to her husband to confront him. "So that's why you went there. You went to see Molly. You think I didn't notice that you two had been having an affair for a long time. Are you crazy? What affair? Where? She came to ask about Charles. She was in the hospital. She didn't know he was dead. And she came here so cleverly to meet you. Who are you telling? Why didn't you give her the boy? You brought him back to me. I take it the hugging and kissing is over. Here we go again, dragging him around. If you don't like it, you can go anywhere now. That's it. I could really get bored and leave. Doesn't that scare you? Sit down, Kayla." David sighed tiredly. "It doesn't frighten me at all. Yes, I've had enough of your consumerist attitude toward our marriage, toward me, for a long time. I'd like you to leave, though I realize that's almost unrealistic." Kayla was scared again. She had no feelings for David, but material dependence held her much stronger than mental dependence. She started crying again, swearing that she would be the perfect mother for Gary, the best wife for David, and everything remained the same, but not for long. Kayla couldn't play the role of good mother for long. It cost her nothing to leave the boy home alone, without even making dinner, leaving only an admonition. "Sit quietly and don't say a word when he comes home. I'll bring you a chocolate bar." But to restrain her nature, she could not even in front of her husband, now and then snapped at the child. In the end, her manner of leaving the child alone almost led to tragedy. Trying to cook, sit down, eat, he could not cope with the gas stove, and if the neighbors had not helped, there could have been a fire. After this, David declared that he did not want to live with her anymore and filed for divorce. After a series of scandals and tantrums, Kayla left, taking everything of value from the house. David was not in the claim, considered that this is not the most expensive price for freedom from such a woman. All this time he sometimes met with Molly, often talked to her on the phone, but for a long time did not dare to confess his feelings. It was only after finalizing his divorce from Kayla that David finally said that she, Molly, was and still is the dearest woman in his life. "I never would have said that if I'd lived with Charles. Back then, as a young man, I just didn't dare interfere in your relationship. I saw how you loved someone else and he reciprocated. As a result, I thought I could be content to see you, even if it was as your best friend's wife. What to say about that now, David? It's a thing of the past. Why shouldn't it, this case, be the present? I realize now that I'm not the most advantageous fiancé, divorced with a child, and I'm in no hurry to have you. But think still, could we be husband and wife? Isn't that completely impossible? I'm sorry, but it's impossible to propose like that." Molly smiled. "So is that the only problem?" David rejoiced. "Contrary to my name, I've always been so unromantic. Thanks for the tip." The man suddenly got down on one knee, took a beautiful box out of his pocket, opened it and handed it to Molly. "Become my wife, Molly. I've been preparing for this day for so long." Molly pressed her palms to her cheeks and laughed happily.
Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Camille had already been living in the orphanage for more than 6 months. The 13-year-old girl kept herself apart all this time. She did not want to come into contact with her peers and classmates. For this, she was nicknamed Bun. Camille was not at all offended by this offensive nickname, as she realized that it was her own fault that now she is called such a girl. When she got to the orphanage, she kept thinking, was it right that she volunteered to live in this institution? After all, Camille told the class teacher about her life, and the teacher sounded the alarm. And all was that Camille had divided her life into 2 parts. Until the age of 11, the girl grew up a happy child. She was cherished by her mom, and Dad tried his best they could to buy fashionable things. In general, the parents wanted their daughter to not need anything. And then something happened, and everything went wrong. Initially, the parents between themselves began to fight often, after which the girl's mother often cried. Then he stopped coming home. The father slept over. Camille realized that there was an unhealthy atmosphere in the house, and it would not end well. However, Camille couldn't understand why her parents were fighting, and so she asked her mother, "Why do you and her father fight so often? Do you really want to know?" "I do. I want us to live like we used to, happily and as a family. And I don't want you to cry." "Then go and ask your father why we fight with him." The girl nodded to her mother in response, and when her father came, she turned to him with the same question. The father looked at his daughter carefully, and then called her back to the children's room and put her on a chair, and sat opposite him. The man nervously ran his palm through his hair and then said, "Daughter, you are not so small, and some things should understand. Anyway, I've fallen out of love with your mother, and I want to divorce her. I wanted to talk to you about it earlier, but I didn't dare. Divorcing my mom won't affect our relationship. I just won't live here, but I'll visit you." "Dad, is there another woman in your life?" "That's a serious question. I'll be honest with you. You're right. I have a woman I love and want to live with. You've made your point. I don't want to talk to you anymore," roughly said the girl and rushed to the bathroom, where she gave vent to tears. Now Camille understood her mother, who had been crying a lot lately. After this conversation with her father, a few days passed, and the man soon packed his things and left their family. Camille became withdrawn after Papa's departure. She was incredibly hurt that her father had betrayed her and her mom for another woman. And the girl's mother, after she was abandoned by her husband, just sobbed and cursed her fate. At first, Camille's father visited her, coming once a week to school after lessons. However, Camille did not talk to him and tried to get away from her father as soon as possible. This continued for a month, and the man began to come to school less and less often. Meanwhile, the girl's mother, in order to somehow survive the betrayal, began to impose on strong drinks. Even not perfectly understood that the mother degenerates every day. And when once again the father appeared at school, the girl told him everything and asked him to talk to her mother. The man looked sadly at his daughter and said that he would not do this. And then he added, "Your mom is a grown woman and should understand what she is doing. And I also want to say that now I will rarely visit you. You don't spoil me much with your visits anyway. There's a reason for that. I have a woman I live with who's expecting a baby in the near future, and now I'm gonna have a lot on my mind. You must realize that a baby needs a lot of attention." "That's a great thing to say. You're telling your own daughter. So I don't want to be taken care of. Get out then, and you cannot appear in my life at all." Barely holding back her sobs, the girl said, "I understand that you are offended at the moment. Be patient a little. As soon as the baby is born and grows up, I will visit you more often. You should be happy because you'll have a sister I'll introduce you to. I've told you everything. Go away, and don't show up with anyone. I don't want to meet anyone. I hate you and despise you." The girl said quickly and hurried home. Camille couldn't wait to cry, but she didn't want to do it in front of her father. As soon as Camille got home, She rushed to her room and burst into tears. She wanted her mother to be there to tell her about her conversation with her father. However, when her mother came home drunk, the girl lost all desire to tell her mother anything. A few days passed. Camille came home and was very surprised to find the front door unlocked. Camille remembered exactly that she had closed the door. The girl entered the room and saw that her mother was sitting in the kitchen with tea and a cat on the table. Camille involuntarily wrinkled her nose and said to Mama, "Are you drinking again? For some reason, it wasn't at work that I got fired." Can you imagine, my daughter? Such a valuable employee was kicked out of the company. What are we going to do now? I'll look for a new job. Don't worry, everything will be fine. It's all your father's fault. He left us to our fate. Camille hoped her mother would go to look for a new job the next day, but she didn't. The girl's mother drank heavily for almost a week while she had money. When the finances ran out, she started selling gold jewelry first, and then she started selling things. This went on for some time. Camille tried her best to convince her mother to stop drinking, but she, being drunk, drove away her daughter. Camille realized that soon they would not be able to buy bread. The girl did not know what to do. Camille began to feel hungry all the time, as her mother rarely cooked at home. And lately her mother began to leave in the evening and come back in the morning and again drunk. That's when Camille decided to talk to Emily's class teacher. She told the teacher about her life. The teacher listened attentively to the school drill and then said to the girl, "You can't live like this. I will try to talk to your mom, but I am afraid it will be a waste of time. The only thing I can offer you is to live in an orphanage, where you will be properly taken care of. Maybe the termination of parental rights will make your mom reconsider her views on life, and she will give up her addiction. And don't get me wrong that after your story I will have to contact the guardianship authorities anyway, because I have to respond to the fact that my student does not finish her meals and often stays home alone at night." The very next day, Emily tried to talk to Camille's mother, but the conversation did not work, as the landlady was in an inadequate state. The teacher made another attempt 2 days later, but the situation was repeated. And then the teacher detained the girl after lessons and told her it was useless to talk to your mom. "I ask you not to take offense at me, but I'm appealing to the guardianship authorities. I just don't have a way out. I'm not offended. I've been thinking about your words for a long time, and it seems to me that I would be much better off in an orphanage now. You see, I'm just afraid that I'll go down a crooked path and start stealing from stores so that I won't feel hungry." Good for you for thinking that way. Don't despair. Maybe when you get to the orphanage, your mom will realize that she might lose her own daughter. And soon Camille showed up at the orphanage. Now she was sitting there thinking about her mother and whether it was right for her to want to live in this institution. Camille was distracted from her thoughts by a woman's voice that said, "Sitting alone again as your peers rampage outside." The girl turned around and looked at the woman with a smile. It was Evelyn, the cleaning lady. Camille had become friends with her. A month after coming here, all the children at the orphanage thought Evelyn was a woman. Camille had a different opinion of the janitor. She liked it when the janitor affectionately called her by her first name and asked her how her day was going. Evelyn walked over to the girl and sat down next to her. The older woman already knew Camille's story. For what reasons the child had ended up in the orphanage, the cleaning lady herself did not understand what made her feel special toward this withdrawn girl. And now, seeing the pensive Camille, she quietly turned to her. What she was dreaming about at the moment, honestly, about my mom in my life. Tell me if it's not a secret. I've been waiting a long time for my mom to come and take me away from here. But she never even visited me once. And now I was wondering if I was right to want to live in an orphanage. And now I realize that I was right. I don't need the pits at all. And I have an aversion to her. I feel like pretty soon I'm just gonna hate her. You can't say that about your own mother. You know, I grew up in an orphanage too. My mom gave me up when I was a baby. And at first, I had the same thoughts as you. But as I've grown up, I've changed my mind drastically. Tell me why. Interested? Camille asked. I'll try to explain it to you with my own example. As soon as I left the orphanage, I entered medical school. When I graduated, I met a young man named Roman. This guy started courting me, and soon we both realized that we loved each other. Soon we had a wedding with him. And then we had our firstborn son, who was named Constantine. And now I come to the most important part. Why did I stop hating my mother? It's because with my husband I lived in peace and harmony. We had a wonderful son. You see, I've been a happy woman all these years. And now you just imagine that if my mother had not given birth to me, I would not have experienced any of this, because I would not be in this world. And that's why I am grateful to my mother for giving me life. And my mother left me in the hospital, but I do not blame her, because it is quite possible that she had good reasons for it. But you know my story, don't you? My mom's only good reason was to drink hard liquor. Your mom slipped up. She's a weak person. Not everyone can be a strong person. Don't just hate her. Believe that you'll grow up. You'll have a happy life. And you will thank your mom more than once for living in this world. Smiling, said the old woman. I don't know. Maybe you are right about that. And tell me, why do you work as a cleaner if you have a nursing education? That's a separate story. At one time I worked as a nurse in a children's clinic. When the years passed, I retired, but continued to work. But soon the management told me that it was necessary to give way to young staff. I had to quit. I did not regret it, as I had a loving husband with me. And my son at that time got married and left for another city. And after I was retired and sitting at home, my husband passed away a year later. And why did you go back to work after that? I don't understand. Sitting alone in four walls is not a particularly pleasant occupation. You're so young, you wouldn't realize it. I just started to feel lonely. And then my son took out a mortgage to buy an apartment. He needed help with the money. So I decided that I'd rather work than just stay at home beating around the bush. And now I've been working here for 4 years, and I've never regretted it. Why don't the children from the orphanage treat you well? I think that this is a question you should ask your peers, not me, Evelyn said with a smile. And then she added, and to find out the answers of boys and girls, you need to talk to them, not stay away from them. Years of life went by. Everything was also kept aloof from peers. Both the boys and the orphanage staff were used to it by now, except that Evelyn was dissatisfied with the fact that Camille was not a sociable child and often talked to the girl about it. And the girl, in turn, in response, only kept silent. Time flew by, and now Camille has already turned 18 years old. It was time for the girl to start living on her own. And the day before Camille had to leave the orphanage, she was approached by a cleaning lady who said, "You're starting a new epoch in your life. You must be careful, because living on your own, you can make a lot of mistakes. I know that the state gave you a one-room apartment somewhere in the periphery, but that's okay. The main thing is that you have your own corner. The only place you've been allocated is there. There's no furniture. I already thought of that. I'll buy you a kitchen table with 4 stools. It'll be a housewarming gift. A bed and a dresser. I'll give them from my son's room. He doesn't need this furniture, but it'll be good for you. I'll give you some of the kitchen utensils. Of course, you've got to give me something to eat. When I decide to visit you, if you don't mind, I'll always be glad to have you here. You've been so supportive while I've been here. I'll be eternally grateful. Oh, don't give me that big talk. And what kind of gratitude is there to be thankful for? Why don't you tell me what you're gonna do? How are you gonna get out of here? I want to be an announcer, and I'm gonna try to get into college. And of course, I'll look for part-time work in the evenings to make a living. And if you don't get in, believe me, it happens a lot. I'll get a job, and in a year I'll try again. And soon Camille moved into a studio apartment. She quickly got settled in and immediately got to know her neighbor. It was a middle-aged woman whose name was Wendy. Soon Camille tried to enter the institute, but disappointment awaited her. The girl missed a few points. After she found out that she was unlucky with the enrollment, she came home in a bad mood. She wanted to cry with grief. Camille only sat down on the bed as she received a call on her cell phone from Evelyn, who asked how things were going. The girl tried not to cry and mouthed, "I didn't get in. And I had so much faith in my abilities." That says what? That you shouldn't be overconfident. Just write that you're going to make your beautiful face raw and put it aside for the moment. Otherwise, I'll scold you like a little girl who went to the wrong potty. The old woman said sternly, "Do you know how to cheer up?" Laughing, the girl said, "That's great. What are your plans now?" "Well, I'm going to look for a job. I need finances to live on." A few days later, the girl got a job in a flower pavilion. The manager at first worked together with Camille, helping her to learn the art of how to beautifully design a bouquet. And after a couple of weeks, the director of the pavilion, Jenna, approved the girl's actions and said that now she could work independently. Camille was happy because she was praised by the director. And so the first day came when Camille went out to work at the pavilion. One girl was very worried, but the first shift went out without any misunderstandings. And on the second day, Camille went to work without worrying that she would not be able to fulfill her duties. The first month flew by as Camille worked in the flower pavilion. The girl enjoyed going to work. One day, a young man came to see her and immediately complimented Camille on her good looks. Camille often heard such words from representatives of the stronger sex and calmly treated them. But this young man said the compliment in a special way, and the girl looked at him with interest. Meanwhile, the guy said, "Can I buy a bouquet of flowers that will reflect your beauty?" Camille, hearing this, laughed and handed the visitor a bouquet of decorative daisies. The young man, seeing the flowers, also laughed and said, "You obviously underestimate yourself. And to be honest, I need the bouquet to give to my friend's girlfriend. It's her birthday today." Camille looked around at the ready bouquets and then chose gladioli. She handed the flowers to the young man and said that such a bouquet should be to the girl's taste. The guy took the mustache and paid and then asked permission to see Camille off in the evening. Camille was not ready for this and therefore refused. Soon the visitor left. The girl had worked her shift and was getting ready to close the pavilion when she saw again the guy who had complimented her today. She looked questioningly at the young man and asked him if he needed another bouquet. "No flowers today. I just want to see you off." "But I already refused your request." "All right. Then sell me a bouquet of white roses." Camille complied with the visitor's request, and he took the flowers and put them on the counter, saying that the roses were bought for her. And after that, the guy left the pavilion. The girl was surprised by the stranger's behavior, and at that moment thought that the young man was strange. After this incident, a couple of days passed, and Camille already closed the pavilion and was going to go home. Suddenly, she was called by a lover of daisies. "Would you give me a couple of minutes?" Camille looked at the stranger and recognized him as the man who had recently given her roses. The young man stood near the foreign car and elbowed her. The girl asked what the guy wanted, and the one after her words came up to her and answered that he could not wait to get acquainted with the beauty. Camille did not know how to act in this situation and therefore said, "Let's not do this, and I disgust you." The young man said in surprise, "I didn't say that. I'm just not used to it. Getting acquainted like that. You're putting a price on yourself," sarcastically said the stranger. And then he added, "How long do you have to be groomed to tell me your name?" "All right, you're on. My name is Camille. Now we're talking. And my name is Stephen. Let's get you a ride in the car." "If you want a ride, I'm not getting in the car on foot." Stephen nodded and followed the girl. The young man told different anecdotes about Camille laughed. The girl noted to herself that the new acquaintance was an excellent conversationalist and easy to communicate with, and soon the couple approached Camille's house. Camille thanked the guy for seeing her off, but Stephen stopped her and asked for permission to take a leisurely walk with her again tomorrow. The girl, after some thought, agreed. When she got home, Camille involuntarily thought about the man. It suddenly seemed to her that perhaps this man was her soulmate. And then she pushed these thoughts away from her, realizing that she did not know Stephen at all to allow such thoughts. All the following week, the young man met the girl from work almost every day. From him, she learned that he was 24 years old and studying at the institute. The guy also said that he lived on his own in a 2-room apartment. Stephen said that his father is engaged in business and his mother is a housewife. When Camille heard all this, she said with a smile, "You're just like a major." "That's right. I think I am, too, and it doesn't offend me. Why did I tell you all about me? You haven't told me anything about your own person. I'm also interested to know who your parents are, why you work in a flower pavilion and not study." Camille looked at the guy and said that she was a pupil of an orphanage. She did not tell him the reason why she had gotten there. She was uncomfortable to admit that her mom consumed strong drinks. Stephen, when he heard that Camille was from the orphanage, looked at her in a strange way. This look was noticed by the girl, and she asked what was wrong. The guy at the same moment smiled welcomingly and said that everything was fine, and then invited the interlocutor to come to visit him. Camille refused. It seemed to her that it was too early to be alone with Stephen. The young man, when he heard that Camille did not want to visit, said reproachfully, "And I thought we trusted each other, but it turned out to be completely different. I get the feeling you think I'm a monster. You're wrong. You're a nice guy, but I'd rather get some fresh air than sit in an apartment. But it's better to get some fresh air than to sit in an apartment. You and I have plenty of time. Take me up on my offer. By the way, I have a large soap collection. I know my hobby sounds weird, but I collect soap. Interesting." With a smile said a girl and thought, "And why not really come to visit? Well, at least for an hour." The young man, seeing the doubts of the interlocutor, immediately said, "I'll get you home safe and sound, and you will choose the soap you like. You can even have several and take it from me as president." The girl looked at Stephen and agreed. The couple got into the car and the car started. Camille was riding in a foreign car for the first time. She was inspecting the interior. The young man was discreetly observing it. When the girl turned her attention to the road, the guy asked if she liked the car. Camille enthusiastically concluded that the car was wonderful. She added that it must be very expensive. Stephen voiced the cost, and the interlocutor, ouch, nodded. The driver, seeing her reaction, laughed. Soon the couple was already in Stephen's apartment. The girl immediately assessed the atmosphere and softly mumbled that everything here is arranged with taste. The young man smiled and replied that it was the merit of his mother. And then the owner of the apartment offered the guests to drink a glass of sparkling wine. But Camille flatly refused. Then Stephen opened the bar and took out a bottle of liquor from there. He dug it out and splashed the liquid into the shot glasses with the words, "I bought it when I suggested you buy it from Aristov. This drink is not quoted in the orphanage. You must be used to Belenka." The girl from these words of the guy shuddered as from a blow, and sharply said that she does not use strong drinks at all, and then said that if he once again allowed himself to talk to her in this way, then their communication on this note stops. The guy smiled in response and asked his guest to relax, promising that he would not allow himself to do that again. And then Stephen poured himself a strong drink and emptied the glass. The girl, seeing this, involuntarily wrinkled her nose. Then she asked to see the soap collection. The owner of the apartment cordially agreed to fulfill Camille's request and invited her into the bathroom, where the original shelf on the entire wall was pierced, on which were arranged pieces of soap. The girl began to look at the collection with curiosity. Meanwhile, the young man had left the bathroom and had another 100 grams of hard liquor before returning to his visit. Stephen watched as Camille stood on tiptoe and took out first one bar of soap, which she brought to her nose and inhaled the aroma, and then the next. The man felt at that moment a desire to possess this girl right now at this moment enveloped him, and he wrapped his arms around Camille and his hands and turned her to face him, and then starts to tear off the girl's blouse. Camille screamed out loudly for him to leave her alone. However, the guy picked up the guest in his arms and carried her to the couch. Camille was already well aware of what the owner of the apartment was going to do. And then she screamed, "Stop, please. I don't want it to happen like this. After all, I haven't been intimate with a man once before. Not to build for myself, not to cross the road from the orphanage. And they've been doing it there since they were 12. Just be a decent girl now, and we'll give each other pleasure." Camille tried to push the young man away, but the forces were unequal, and after a while Stephen lay on his back and breathed often. And the girl, tucking her legs under her belly, barely audible, was crying. The owner of the apartment, literally after a few minutes from breathing, said, "And you did not deceive me. It turned out, in fact, pious diva, but you pass. You liked it too, didn't you? But tell me the truth. I will now rest, and we can continue." After these words, the girl jumped to her feet and ran to the kitchen, where she grabbed a knife. As soon as Stephen began to approach her, she screamed exhaustedly that she would take her own life if he came near her. The landlord snorted and calmly replied, "I don't need to touch you. I've had mine. Now you can go to all four sides. By the way, you can choose a few bars of soap from the collection. That's your pleasure fee. If you want to meet me, you'll find my address here. Oh, and one more thing. Don't go to the police because my father has connections there. You're only hurting yourself by doing this." The girl looked at the guy with hatred and quickly got dressed, then ran out of the apartment. Camille knew that it was a long way for her to get home, and it would be better to take transportation. But she felt like people knew what had just happened and were looking at her with judgment. So Camille decided that she would get home on her own. Soon the girl was already in the apartment, where she immediately rushed into the bathroom. She wanted to wash herself off with the touch of Stephen's hands. Camille rubbed her body with exasperation, silent. Then Camille sank to the bottom of the tub and sobbed bitterly. The next day, Camille asked the director of the flower pavilion for a day off. The girl told the supervisor that she felt disgusting. The supervisor advised her to call a doctor and said she would work by herself for a few days, while Camille is not feeling well. The girl has been manifesting at home for several days. She did not answer her neighbor's calls, and also the cleaner of the orphanage. Camille just wanted to be at home for a while and hoped that she would succeed. However, Evelyn thought quite differently, who was concerned that the ward was not answering her calls, and the elderly woman initially went to the girl's workplace, and after finding out why Camille was absent from the pavilion, she had already gone to her home. The elderly woman rang the doorbell for a long time, and then, realizing she wouldn't get that one opened, said loudly, "I know you're home. If you don't open the door, I'll break it down. And you know very well that I will." Camille, knowing the temper of the cleaning lady, I realized that Evelyn would do as the girl said, opened the door and saw the worried face, the elderly woman. Camille smiled tiredly and invited the guest to pass. Evelyn looked at the wards and sternly asked what had happened. Camille did not want to tell the cleaning lady anything, and so she lied to her that she had quarreled with a young man. The guests looked at the girl with amazement and muttered, "That's the guy you're killing for. The one you just met. I don't understand you. Did you fall in love so quickly? Let's go to the kitchen and have a cup of tea, and you can tell me all about it." Camille realized that Evelyn would have to lie, so she quickly made up stories. She told the elderly woman that she had quarreled with the young man because he had forbidden her to work. The guest, hearing the explanation, only laughed and remained silent. "That's a silly reason for a quarrel. You should have told your boyfriend that you need something to live on. And if he's going to support you, let him do it. I'm not gonna tell him anything. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Maybe I could have a mother-son talk with him. No way. Better tell me how things are going at the orphanage." The landlady spoke, trying to distract Evelyn from the dangerous topic. Time moved slowly. Camille went to work and then went straight home. Stephen did not appear in her life. What was the girl glad of? She wanted to cut this man out of her life completely and never think of him. So Camille got up in the morning as usual. She had to go to work. As Camille felt sick, she rushed to the restroom, where she immediately threw up. The girl was puzzled as to what had happened to her, but immediately she tried to put all thoughts about her health aside as she had to get ready for work. Camille hoped that the nausea would go away during the day, but it did not. The young woman came home irritated after a day of work. She was depressed about her own physical condition and did not even eat dinner that day. She went to bed early. The next day, the same thing happened again. The girl felt nauseous all the time. After work, she went to the store to buy milk, which she loved very much and allowed herself to buy on rare occasions. Camille went to the counter and wanted to take a bottle. She realized that if she took even a sip of milk, she would immediately vomit. Camille did not buy anything and went home. When she got home, the girl sat down on the bed. The doorbell rang. Camille opened it and saw a neighbor who was holding fried pies on a plate. The woman unceremoniously entered the apartment and spoke. "I want to treat you to some baked goods. I happened to buy fuel milk today." "Oh, don't even remind me of milk. It makes me sick at one word," said the girl, looking at her saliva. "I don't understand you. You've always loved milk, and now you're sick of it. I've been sick of it since yesterday. I thought it would go away today, but it didn't. How's your stool?" "It's fine. I'm walking. It's not poisoning. You know, sweetheart, all your symptoms indicate that you're pregnant. I have a pretty good idea who the father of this baby is. I've seen your young man out the window a few times with you, only now he's gone missing. If I were you, I'd go to the drugstore and get a test. I'm not a gynecologist, but trust me, you're definitely in the right place. Don't be silly. I won't drink tea because I'm tired at work. I'm sleepy." With a slightly noticeable irritation, muttered the landlady of the apartment, who at this minute wanted Wendy to go to her room. The neighbor, hearing that she was being beaten about missing, resentfully pressed her lips together and quickly left. As soon as the woman left the apartment, Camille began to pack quickly. She only wanted to buy a pregnancy test after Wendy's words. The girl was able to allow the thought that she could have gotten pregnant by the rascal. Camille bought the test and persevered with the appropriate procedure. The girl was very worried. She absolutely did not want to give birth to a child from Stephen, who had done such a thing to her. When the test showed positive results, Camille squatted down and cried desperately. The young woman did not know what to do in this situation. The first thing that came to mind was to talk to Evelyn and tell her everything honestly. Camille received a call from the cleaning lady and asked her to come to visit her tomorrow. The elderly woman readily agreed and asked what to take for tea. Camille replied that there was no need to bring any guests since she had Krieger. Evelyn wanted to ask her mentee something else, but she said that the whole conversation would take place tomorrow. The next day in the evening, the old woman was already sitting at Camille's house. The landlady, with her head down, told how she had visited Stephen and how it had all ended. Evelyn listened attentively to Camille and asked what she was going to do. Camille tearfully said she wanted to terminate the pregnancy. When the guest heard this, she said softly, "And you are sure of your decision? Very often it happens that after such procedures, women can no longer have children. But we have modern medicine, and I have nothing to fear. Just understand, if I give birth to this child, this baby will remind me all the time what he did. I am afraid that I hate this child. I'm also afraid that the child will inherit the father's genes and be just as much of a rascal in life." Wait, this is where it all comes together. Is that too much to be afraid of? Let me get this straight. What about medicine? You know, there's a saying that goes, there's a silver lining. That's the case with you. Let's move on. That the child will resemble his father, but it won't. As soon as you put the baby to the breast to feed, you'll realize that this baby is yours alone. Now, about genes. What do genes have to do with it? You're gonna raise the baby. What you put into it is what you'll reap. I'm not in any way trying to talk you into keeping the baby. I'm just trying to make you realize that you have to make these decisions consciously, not in haste, when emotions are running high. And that's what you're going through right now. My advice to you is to go to a gynecologist and make sure that you are pregnant, since tests can also give wrong results. If the pregnancy is confirmed, then check with the doctor until what term you can think about whether to keep the baby or not. And only after that, make a decision. After a while, Camille had already been to the women's clinic and knew for sure that she was in an interesting position. The young woman had contradictory feelings. On the one hand, she was pleased that life had begun inside her. But on the other hand, when she thought of Stephen, she felt disgusted with the child. Camille procrastinated for a long time and then made the choice that she would give birth to this baby, and it would be a joy in her life. The young woman was informed about her decision by the orphanage worker, who was happy to hear the news and immediately said that she would give the stroller as a gift as a grandmother. After Evelyn learned that the ward would give birth, she came to visit her and from the threshold said that it was necessary to have a serious talk. Camille was surprised at this and invited the elderly woman into the guest room and sat down and looked at the landlady carefully and only then spoke. Having a baby is good, but you need to think about the financial side. You have to persuade your manager to make you an official salesperson. That way you'll get an allowance. And if she refuses, find a way to get the director of the flower pavilion to agree. You'll need that money to live on in the future. You know, I don't just give advice. After all, I've lived most of my life already. And please don't put off this conversation with your supervisor until later. Camille, after this conversation with Evelyn, turned to her supervisor. Jenna promised to think about it. And now a month has passed since that conversation, and the supervisor has remained silent on the subject. Camille again talked to her supervisor about official employment. Jenna promised that she would do it in a week. However, a month passed, but the supervisor did not lift a finger on the matter. And when Camille tried to talk about it again, the supervisor pointed to the young woman's slightly bulging belly and said, "Do you want me to pay you benefits? But that's not going to happen. Why would I transfer my money to nowhere?" "You don't say." "What do you mean, nowhere? This money will be a great help to us. As soon as the baby's old enough, I'm going back to work for you." My answer to you: no, you work one more week and then I'm firing you. You're a good girl. Yeah, she's helping the unmarried. And I'm not going to. Camille was stunned by Jenna's answer. Camille seemed to have developed a good relationship with her supervisor. After all, when the supervisor asked to stay longer after the workday, the girl willingly complied with her request. And now that Camille had been refused, she was extremely offended that she had received such a reward for all her hard work. Camille recounted this conversation with the director of Evelyn's flower pavilion. The elderly woman was outraged after hearing the news. She wanted to go and talk to Jenna herself and tell the manager that she was acting illegally. That's one thing. And secondly, decent people don't do that. Camille talked the old lady out of it. She said, "You won't get anything out of it. I worked unofficially, and that says it all. It's my own fault for not having thought of this earlier, to formalize an employment contract." Soon Camille was out of work. The young woman was handed as she realized that the salary she received after she stopped working in the flower pavilion would not be enough for a long time. So Camille began to pound various structures in order to find some kind of work before the payment of maternity benefits. However, she was denied everywhere, and seeing that she is in an interesting position, and still the young woman found a job. True, it paid a pittance. The girl had to hand out advertising booklets on the street. Camille realized that she earns a pittance here, but at the moment she was happy about it. Time flew by, and now the young woman gave birth to a baby girl, whom she named Vanessa. Camille fondly felt the little bundle and mentally thanked the cleaning lady, who had made her realize that the decision should be made without any violent thoughts. Camille realized that it was only thanks to that conversation with the technician that she had kept the baby under her heart. And now that baby was born from the maternity ward. Camille was greeted by Evelyn. The elderly woman accepted the small package from the nurse's hands and suddenly cried. Camille was puzzled why the cleaning lady was crying now and asked her about it. "You should be happy. Are you crying? Why? I'm glad you made the right decision at the right time. And now I answer to my granddaughter." Time has slowly moved on. Camille enjoyed learning the role of a mother. She was busy practicing with her daughter. All the motherly duties she lovingly performed. And even when Vanessa switched from day to night, it didn't work for the young woman to have to adjust to a child. It had been a month since Camille had become a mom. And at this point, Camille clearly realized that the allowance was completely inadequate for living. Her daughter needed to buy formula, which cost a lot of money, and she also had to buy shipping, oils, baby soap, and other baby products for the baby. The young woman was at a loss, and it was the first time she had not paid her utility bill. Another 2 months passed. Camille lost weight during this time, as she denied herself food, only to be fed. Camille's daughter helped Evelyn, but only in small amounts. The elderly woman saw perfectly well how difficult it was for her ward, and one day a conversation took place between the cleaning lady and Camille. Camille said to the technician in despair, "I don't know what to do. I was already thinking of putting my daughter in an orphanage for a while and visiting her there. And as soon as she's a little older, I'll take her out of there and get a job in the meantime. That's the stupidest decision I've ever heard. If you do that, you'll lose Vanessa forever. You'd have to give up your parental rights if you did that. Do you even think about what you're saying? I don't know how to make ends meet." With tears in her eyes, said the girl, and immediately added, "Other children at this age have cribs. My daughter still sleeps in the stroller you gave us. The crib is not the most important thing. I'll try to give you a little more money. I don't feel comfortable accepting finances from you anymore. I don't know when I'll be able to pay you back. I'd like to get a job, and then everything will change." After this conversation, about 2 weeks passed, and Evelyn came to visit Camille. The old woman went into the kitchen and put a box with a long cake on the table. The landlady looked at her guest with bewilderment and asked what kind of celebration. The cleaning lady smiled and said, "Celebrating my dismissal from work. I've become too old to carry big buckets of water. And now I've decided to retire. And the salary at the orphanage is tiny. I'll be with Vanessa from now on. And you're trying to get a job, but you still need to help your son. I haven't forgotten about that. They'll cut back on their rations. There's no other option. Although there is one other option, which is to go to the father, establish paternity with DNA, and then demand child support from him. Don't ever say that to me again. I'll never go to what? This is my child and mine alone. Consider me." Vanessa started from the wind in the field with a challenge, exclaimed Camille. "You see, so there's only one way out. I sit busy and you look for a job. Did I like the way you stood up to Stephen just now?" Evelyn said with a smile. A few days later, Camille got a job as a salesman in a small market not far from home. The young woman was attracted by the fact that the market had a convenient schedule. It was necessary to come to 7 o'clock, and the Labor Day ended at 14:00. The only thing that marred the girl was not particularly high wages, about which she told Evelyn. The old woman said in response that she found something to be upset about. "Your salary is higher than the one I received when I worked in the orphanage." Soon Camille went to work. She was a little uneasy, as she had never worked with weighty goods. However, her employer explained everything in detail and spent the day with her, helping the girl to cope with selling vegetables. And so already Camille worked for 3 days at the market. Here the girl met her neighbor Molly, who was selling fruit. The women talked to each other, and Molly in one of the conversations unexpectedly dropped that Camille had hired an employer for nothing. The woman looked at her interlocutor with surprise and asked her why she had said that. Molly embarrassed Cashin, and then, waving her hand, spoke out. "And what will I hide it from you? All the same, after all, the truth will tell you others." The thing is that your boss, Nancy, very often changes salespeople. Regular customers will tell you that soon enough. I've had a couple of people tell me that there's a new salesperson again, but I didn't pay much attention to it. And why Nancy and the salesman do not linger. The answer is simple, constant shortages. At Sveta's, the longest that the sellers have worked is 4 months, as far as I remember. A few days after this conversation, there was an unpleasant incident at Camille's workplace. Toward the end of the workday, as usual, Nancy and her husband arrived to pick up the proceeds. Camille counted out the money and held it out to the supervisor, who looked at the financials and grudgingly said that the amount was too small. Camille narrowed her eyes and replied that they had overpriced vegetables, and customers often left for competitors. Nancy, hearing this, said that one should be able to interest the person who approached the goods and not rely on high prices. The businesswoman then approached the vegetables and inspected them meticulously. Nancy then saw some affected tomatoes. She took out the tomatoes and placed them in front of Camille. The woman looked at the woman perplexed and said quietly, "Vegetables have a way of spoiling. It's not my fault. I agree with you on that. But spoiled goods should be weighed and recorded and kept separately. But I did. I just didn't have time to put these tomatoes aside," Camille said, and quickly took out a notebook in which she wrote down the spoiled vegetables. The girl held out her notes to Nancy. The businesswoman took a quick look at the notebook and spoke in a stern voice. "All this will be deducted from your wages. And now these tomatoes can be taken to your home. How's that? And yesterday's game was cucumbers. I gave them to you. Are you going to take them out of my paycheck too? But that's not fair." Almost crying, said the girl. "It's not for me to teach you how to work with goods. You did not rush to me, so you should do your job. If you see that you have a spoilage of this or that kind of vegetables, you try to block it. From this day on, you are responsible for all spoiled tomatoes, cucumbers, and so on." Camille was walking home after a day's work in high spirits. As soon as she entered the apartment, Evelyn approached her and raised her index finger to her lips. That meant it was worth talking in a whisper. It meant it was worth talking in whispers since Vanessa was asleep. The old woman, seeing Camille in a bad mood, immediately realized that the girl was in trouble. She asked Camille to go to the kitchen and asked her what was wrong. The girl took out the tomatoes and put them on the table. And only then she told what had happened. And at the end of her narrative, she added, "I don't know how to weigh people. I am ashamed to do it. I will not hide that I add a few grams somewhere. I was advised to do so by a neighbor who sells nearby. But how can I answer the customers if I have a kilogram of tomatoes, for example, will rot? Do not be upset. From work a month and see what salary you get. If it will be pennies, then there's nothing to stay there." A month went by and an audit was done. Nancy informed Camille that there was a shortage and told her the amount. The girl was already ready for it, so without too many questions, the businesswoman offered to deduct the shortage. Then she informed Nancy that she was no longer working for her. The next day, Camille again went to look for work at the market where she worked. The girl did not want to go, and that was one reason not to go out with Nancy. Camille decided that it was possible to find a position as a vendor at the bazaar, which was a few stops away from her home. The girl remembered Evelyn's advice, and so she wanted to get a job selling piece goods. Camille was lucky right away. She saw several advertisements at the entrance to the market for sellers. Camille approached one employer, and he said he would be happy to hire her. The girl immediately asked about the salary, and the man voiced the amount. Camille has been drinking since morning, looked at the entrepreneur, and said that this is paltry money. The employer smirked and said, "I do not know you, my dear, so there will be a trial period. If we work out, well, in the sense that there will be no shortages, then in a couple of months your salary will increase. That's what all the entrepreneurs do around here. Maybe you should check it out." The girl sighed dejectedly and agreed to the man's proposal. And then she went on to look at the other sellers' merchandise. It was only when Camille walked a little farther away that she was stopped by a woman who was selling toys. The stranger spoke up. "I heard that you are tuning up for work. Well, I can tell you that all these entrepreneurs promise to raise wages after a while, but not all of them keep their promises. Are you saying that the man I hired will cheat me too? I don't know anything about him. I'm talking about me. I've been working here for about 4 months now, and I've had no complaints. And I was promised a raise. They're still giving me a raise. I'm out of options, so I'm going to have to take my chances and work for this man." Camille left the market after talking to the saleswoman and went to the bus stop. The girl felt disappointed that things were going wrong for her. She thought she would find a job where she would get a great salary, but everything turned out to be exactly the opposite. Soon the bus pulled up. The girl entered the transportation and sat down on the empty seats, but 2 girls were already sitting against her and talking animatedly. Camille, to distract herself from bitter thoughts, involuntarily began to listen to the dialogue of strangers. Initially, Camille realized that they were 2 former classmates who had met after a while and were discussing their peers who were in the same class. Soon, Camille got tired of listening to the girls and wanted to turn her attention to the view from the window. So she heard what the brunette said, addressing her interlocutor. "Do you remember Miranda from our class, who always wore her older sister's clothes? We used to make fun of her for it all the time. You wouldn't believe it. I saw her the other day at the coffee shop where I was sitting with my son. I was stunned at how Katya looked originally. I didn't even believe it was her. I called out her name. Miranda smiled at me and moved to the table next to me. I stared at her with my mouth hanging open. It was a luxurious girl, which is immediately obvious that she visits expensive beauty salons. About the way she is dressed, I'm not talking at all. She has fashionable pants, a suit of such a coastal color, and in that to it in sandals. Practically on all fingers descendants and a gold ring. If in general to say, then in front of me was a stylish girl who knows her own price. Katya, whom we knew as the poorest in school. Probably married well, replied the person I was talking to. But you are wrong. She is not married, and is not even in a hurry. Then how did she succeed in life? The second girl asked, perplexed. This was curious for me too, and I asked her about it. Miranda answered that she earns money with her body. She said it so simply that I was very sweet of her answer. I asked her if doing it for money is disgusting. The answer was simple. Miranda said that now she can afford what she wants to do. And as for whether it is disgusting or not, she said that she treats it like a job. I was taken aback by this news. I don't even have the words to describe it. And further, Camille did not hear what the brunette said in response, because after the lecturer announced Camille's stop, the girl got off the bus and went home, thinking about the conversation between the 2 former classmates. Just then, the young woman saw a bench and sat down on it. She thought about this Miranda who earns money this way. Camille sat for a while as a call came from her neighbor. Wendy reported that Evelyn had become ill and had been rushed to the hospital. Then the neighbor added that Vanessa was at her place. Camille rose abruptly from the bench and ran home. The young woman immediately went to her, where she learned that Evelyn suddenly felt pain in her chest and called Wendy. She in turn called an ambulance, and the older woman was hospitalized. Camille was frightened. She was worried about the pensioner's condition. Camille called the hospital to find out how Evelyn was doing. But I answered that the woman was now in intensive care and all answers would not be available until the next day. Camille slumped down in her chair after the call. She already realized that tomorrow she would not go to any work because Vanessa had no one to leave her with. And also the girl realized that the pensioner would need medicine, which means that she would need finances. All these thoughts made the young woman cry. She was well aware that there was nowhere to go for help at the moment. The next day, Camille put her daughter in the stroller and went to the hospital. Camille mentally asked the Almighty to make Evelyn feel better. The girl was very afraid of losing her dear person. And here it was not that the old woman helped financially, but in another way, that the pensioner supported Camille morally and did not let her be discouraged. Soon Camille was already sitting in the hospital room opposite Evelyn, who had already been brought back from intensive care. The girl stroked the elderly woman's hand and asked her to hold on. The pensioner smiled at the ward and replied, "To me, don't worry, I made it through. But how will you be now?" "Alone, we are slowly leaving. I have an idea. Let's call your son to come here. It would be nice for you to see him." "You're going about it the wrong way, sweetheart. I'm not going to die, so let your son come here when he gets a chance. And if you're implying that you're asking him for financial help, forget it. My son is having a hard time too. He's paying a mortgage, and he has 3 kids to feed, clothe, and shoe." All right, calm down. I didn't mean to ask him for help. I just thought it would do you good to see your son and get you back on your feet." The turkey thought I was screwed too, he said sternly. And the woman. And then she said more softly, "All right, I knew you meant what you said out of the goodness of your heart. You'd better tell me that your job is going great. They said you'd be out in a week. So you have exactly 1 week to rest and get back into action," said Camille Savrasov. Having worked soon, Camille returned home with her daughter after the hospital. The young woman played with Utah for a while and then fed her and put her to bed. Afterward, she sat down on the couch and thought about her deception about Evelyn's job. Camille suddenly realized that she had not just told a lie to the older woman. It had been done intentionally. Camille had made the decision even then that she would go to the track to earn money. The realization that she would be selling her body no longer frightened the girl. Camille realized that she simply had no way out. It would be possible to go to work as a salesman, but the young woman already knew that she lacked the so-called salesmanship. This meant that Camille would have to pay for shortages or damaged goods. You could also work as a dishwasher, but it paid a pittance, and the other girl was not given, as there was no appropriate education. And so Camille decided to go to the highway. After a while, Evelyn was discharged from the hospital. The pensioner was taken away by Camille and her daughter. The girl fondly hugged the old woman and said that she would not allow her to be sick anymore. Evelyn smiled at her ward's words and promised. Evelyn smiled at her mentee's words and promised not to do it at all. A few more days passed after the discharge of the pensioner. Camille informed the elderly woman that she was going to work tomorrow. Evelyn asked the girl what her job was. Camille thought for a while and replied, "How can I put it to you so you understand? Basically, I have to go around the world. Basically, I have to go to businesses and collect signatures. Why collect them? I won't tell you yet, because it's gonna be a rotating assignment every few days. But the upside is that I'll be paid by the number of signatures, which means as soon as I complete the assignment, we'll have the money. That's a weird job. It's the first time I've heard of such a job," the older woman said, perplexed. "There's nothing strange about it. We are not living in the Stone Age after all. There are many specialties now that you have never even heard of. I'm not going to argue with you. You'd better tell me everything after the first day of work." So Camille is getting ready for work. Evelyn is puzzled and asks the mentees why the working day starts so late, and the time was around 15 o'clock. Camille quickly finds an answer and says that at this time, people are better in contact, and therefore the opportunity to collect more signatures increases. And then the girl added that this way she could earn more money. After a while, Camille stood on the highway. She, so that the pensioner did not guess anything, bought a mini skirt and a blouse with a deep neckline in advance. In all these clothes, the girl changed before going out on the highway. And here already Camille stands on the road and waits for the truck. Initially, cars stopped in front of her, and the drivers offered Camille a ride. However, the girl immediately decided that she needed chauffeurs who work as truckers. She herself did not understand why this decision came to her mind, and soon a truck slowed down in front of Camille. A man's head peeked out of the cab. The driver evaluated the girl and offered her a ride. Camille smiled and got into the driver's cab. The man once again looked at her traveling companion and said, "You must be new here, because I haven't seen you here before. And you, I see that you are already a regular here, if you know everyone," said the girl, trying to say so that her voice did not shake from excitement. However, the man as if caught her inner state, and so he asked, "You are obviously going to do this case for the first time. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I know the rates, and I will pay even a little more than what is required." After a while, Camille was already out of the cab. The young woman adjusted her skirt, and at the same moment heard a man shouting to her that she was gorgeous and that he would like to meet her again. The girl reluctantly waved him off and walked slowly down the road. At the moment, Camille felt dirty. She couldn't stand the urge to shower to wash off the stranger's touch. But Camille forced herself to think about the fact that this was just a job that would help her and not live. The young woman came home. Already as before the evening, Evelyn looked anxiously at the ward, but the latter smiled amiably and said that there was the first earnings, and handed the pensioner the money. The old woman looked at the money and frightenedly said, "Wow, a decent amount for one working day. Today was just a lucky day. There was only one task that needed to be done today. So I tried to collect more signatures. I had to visit a lot of different agencies, but it was worth it. I don't like you coming home alone so late. You're a girl who knows what can happen. You better get fewer signatures and come home earlier. You know, there's a popular wisdom that you can't make all the money you want. That goes for you. We'll see. And now we should be happy that we have finances, and we will be able to buy, not a crib, so that the child sleeps not in a stroller. I'm also very tired as I've been walking a lot. So can I take a shower and go to bed?" Evelyn offered the girl to eat first, and then already take hygienic procedures, but Camille refused. The young woman wanted to actually take a shower and just forget about what she had done today of her own free will. As soon as Camille got to the bed and Evelyn, who had stayed with her tonight because Camille had come home late, was lying next to her, she felt ashamed. The landlady turned to the pensioner in a whisper and apologized for the late visit. The guest stroked her ward in response and asked her not to worry about nothing. Only after these words, Evelyn Camille calmly sighed. Immediately, she was struck by an electric shock. She realized that, doing such work, she had not thought about the most important thing, that she could get pregnant. Camille immediately decided that she would buy birth control tomorrow. The next day, Camille didn't go anywhere. What surprised the pensioner? The elderly woman asked why Camille had the day off today. The girl laughed in response and said that she would not have a job every day. Camille could not admit to Evelyn that today she simply did not want to go to the track, as there was still a residue on her soul from the way she had earned the money. It had been 2 days since Camille had given pleasure to the driver of the truck. It was only after that that the young woman decided to go out on the highway again. It was not an easy decision for her, and it was as if felt by Evelyn, who asked the girl where her office with the management was located. Camille realized that if she didn't make a precise schedule of the so-called work, the pensioner would sound the alarm and start to find out everything herself. So Camille decided that from this day forward, she would go out to the track once every 3 days. Camille had already been working in this way for 2 weeks. During that time, the girl bought her daughter a crib. Camille realized that she could not go on like this forever, and she comforted herself with the fact that it was only until her daughter grew up a little. And then the girl planned to give Anya to the kindergarten and herself to enroll in correspondence studies at the institute. And so Camille once again went out on the highway. She was waiting for a truck, and at the same time remembered the movie Pretty Woman. She liked this movie very much. The girl imagined herself in the role of the main character and dreamed that she would one day happen in her life. She wanted to meet a prince on a white horse who will pull her out of the swamp and will love not only her, but also Anya that. However, the young woman understood that this will not happen, as it only happens in movies, where the plot is invented to interest the viewer. And yet the girl still dreamed about it, realizing that it would not happen to her. Reflections and the girl was interrupted by a stopped car. Camille looked into the car, and from horror, the whole transport belonged to the husband of her neighbor. And this meant that now the man would start asking unnecessary questions about what she was doing on the highway. And in fact, the car door opened, and the neighbor looked out and said in surprise, "Camille, I didn't expect to see you here. What are you doing here?" "My wife told me you got a job." "That's right, Wendy. But it's my day off. And here I am waiting for a young man. Let's just say I have a date. I'll ask you not to tell your spouse about this. She'll be asking me all kinds of questions." "That's right." Laughing, the man said. And then he added, "My Wendy, curious person wants to know everything about everyone. Only that you chose a meeting with your boyfriend in a not very convenient place." "Yeah, I already realized that." As soon as the neighbor left, Camille breathed a sigh of relief. She'd expected a lot more questions from Wendy's husband. And there weren't many. Now the girl was only worried that the neighbor would not tell about their encounter on the road. Camille knew very well that Wendy often met with Evelyn and could tell the elderly woman that Camille was standing on the highway. And if the old woman found out about it, she wouldn't let up until she knew the whole truth. Camille, on the other hand, absolutely did not want Evelyn to know the way she made her money. A few days passed. Camille was once again standing on the highway, waiting for a truck. And then a beautiful black Jeep stopped in front of her. Two big guys jumped out of the cabin, who picked up the girl under the elbows and quickly pushed her into the car. The young woman did not even have time to shout, as she was already in the Jeep. And here an obese man turned to her from the front seat, who looked at her carefully and then asked her how long she had been doing this. Camille was startled and said she did not know what he was talking about. Her phrase made the stranger angry, and he spoke harshly. "You don't make a pie girl of yourself here. This is my territory. And I have already been informed that there is a young lady who works without taxes. And as it turns out, this young lady is you. So let's be honest. Otherwise, my boys are gonna have a different conversation with you." Camille, looking at the stranger, clearly realized that it was not worth lying to this man, because he would keep his word. The girl admitted that she had been out on the track for a little less than a month, and immediately added that she didn't do it every day. Hearing the young woman's retort, the man nodded contentedly. Then he said softly, "My name is Sam. Now I see that you're telling the truth, and you're a good girl, because you figured it out the first time. Now listen to what I have to say. You work on my territory, which means I have to pay tax to the treasury, like any decent citizen. But the treasury for you will not be the state, but my pocket. And in general, on the first of every month, you will bring me a sum of money to my address. If you don't, you realize you'll be dealing with my boys sitting next to you. Now tell me what you got." "I've got you scared," the girl muttered fearfully. "That's great. It's a pleasure doing business with you," said the man, and handed Camille a piece of paper on which was written an address and a sum of money. Camille looked at the entry and the window, and then said, But this is a large sum. It's almost half of what I'll earn in a month, and who has an easy life these days? You see, I'm not an unemployment fund. I want to eat good food too. And if you don't like this amount, go work at the factory as a laborer. I didn't force you to go to the highway, so you decide what's good for you. Anyway, this is a short conversation. Either you pay or you're out of here. And I'm waiting for your decision right now." "Okay, I'll do it." After that, the young woman was allowed out of the car. And as soon as Camille left the car, the Jeep drove off. Camille looked after the car and tears rolled down her cheeks. She realized that from now on, she would have to pay back almost half of the money she had earned. After this conversation, the young woman decided that today she would not work. After a while, the girl was already at home. She entered the apartment and saw the surprised face of the pensioner, who asked why she did not come so early. Camille glumly replied that the day had not gone well and there were no errands to run. Evelyn looked at the girl carefully and said sternly, Don't tell me fairy tales here. Tell me what really happened. I've known you for years, and I can see that you're worried. Camille was about to tell me the truth about where and how she made her money. But then she looked at Evelyn. She felt ashamed to tell the old woman. The girl collected the pensioner again and wrote tall tales that she had not been paid for her assignment today. Evelyn, inquisitive, looked at the interlocutor and helped. I hope you are not deceiving me. And about the fact that they paid, I understand that it's frustrating. But you can't be too upset about it. Every job has a slip-up. You had one. All right, calm down. Come on, I'll feed you and tell you how we fought the duck today. After Evelyn's words, the girl sighed with relief that the conversation on a dangerous topic was over. And then together with the pensioner went to the kitchen, where she listened to the elderly woman, who enthusiastically told how she spent the day sonnets. The next day, Camille felt ill. She had a fever and a sore throat. Camille realized she had a cold. The young woman wrote about herself as she realized that it was impossible to be sicker now. After all, it was urgent to earn money to pay tribute to the track. Soon, Evelyn arrived at Camille's house and immediately announced that the labor activity would cease for the time being. Camille, as soon as she heard this with a sad smile, said that these were the words she had expected from Evelyn. In response, she said, "Don't think I'm such a predictable madam. I'll call a doctor and persuade the doctor to put you in the hospital. You don't have to do that. You're a doctor. So treat me with us agreed, but only sick. You will follow all my instructions." With a smile, said Evelyn, specifically addressing Daddy's ward. Camille recovered. 7 days later, she wanted to go to work again, but she was prevented from doing so by a pensioner. The elderly woman said that Camille had not yet recovered from her illness and needed to stay at home for a couple more days. There was nothing left for the girl to do, only to agree with Evelyn's decision. 2 days later, Camille was already standing on the highway. She was thinking about how to raise the necessary amount for Wendy. The young woman realized that she was not ready to go to work every day, but she also realized that it was necessary to give the money. And then one solution came to her mind, that one day it was necessary to double the number of clients, and only she thought about it as a truck stopped in front of her. The girl climbed into the cab and closed the door and then turned to the driver. Immediately, with fear, she faintly shuddered. In front of her sat the man who had robbed her of her innocence. The young woman only wanted to get out of the car. As the young man menacingly ordered her not to move from her seat, and in doing so grabbed her arm, Camille expelled and asked Stephen to let her go. The guy grinned and said that she had willingly got into the vehicle, and then added that you were a pious lady offering your services on the highway. And at that time you did not make a road out of yourself. Well, let's see what you have managed to learn during this time. I can't wait to reminisce with an old acquaintance who picked up during this time of experience. They're gonna let me out of the car. And don't even think that I'm going to have fun with you, and you shouldn't shame me, since it's only to your credit that I'm out here on the highway making a living. You're the one who took my virginity against my will, and I got pregnant afterward. I have a young daughter who needs food, diapers, skates, etc., and my allowance isn't very high. And you knew I was an orphanage kid with no one to stand up for me. So you used your power that day. I hate you. Are you telling me you had my baby? That's an unexpected twist. Don't tell me you want to get child support from me now. You make money on the highway. Somebody got you pregnant, Stephen said defiantly. Even though you're the biological father of the child, I can assure you that we don't need your money. You can choke on your finances, and the fact that you have a daughter you can forget forever. And let's stop this stupid conversation. There's only one thing I don't understand right now. I mean, you're such a big shot, and you work as a trucker. That doesn't make sense. Okay, I don't want to waste my time with you. Let me get out of the car. I can't take care of myself. Camille tried to open the door of the truck, but she was pulled to her by Stephen force and tried to lift her skirt. The girl screamed in desperation and began to fight back. At that moment, a voice came from behind them. It was a man speaking to the driver. "Let her go right now." "What are you doing?" "Partner, you know I like to have fun with the girls on the road," Stephen said in a perplexed voice. "You'll find another girl on the way," the man replied. "Christopher, you're my partner, but in this case I don't understand you," said Stephen, and let the girl go. In the meantime, Camille glanced back and looked at the protector. He was a handsome middle-aged man who looked her straight in the eye. The girl nodded gratefully and started to open the door of the truck, but she was called by her partner Stephen. The young woman looked back and glanced questioningly at the man. At that moment, he took out a purse and took out some bills, which he immediately handed to Camille with the words, "This is enough for you and the little girl for the first time, and try to change your trade. It doesn't suit you. You'd better find another way to make money. Now go home to your daughter, who's sure to miss you." "But I can't take the money." "Just like that," Camille said. "You can. Take it and go. If I see you on the road again, they'll think you're a fallen woman," Christopher said sternly. The young woman took the money and nodded gratefully once more and quickly got out of the car. As soon as the young woman left the cab, the truck started at the same moment. Camille looked at the car and thought about the stranger's words. Camille stood for a while longer and then headed home. The girl thought that there was only one trouble for today. It was the meeting with Stephen, but she was wrong. Camille had just arrived home, so she saw that her neighbor was visiting. Camille said hello to her, but she said nothing and hurried away to her room. The girl looked at her neighbor with a puzzled look. Then she turned to Evelyn. "What's the matter with Wendy? I came in and she just ran off. She didn't even say hello, and I thought we'd had no quarrel with her." The pensioner didn't say a word in response. The old woman asked if she had earned it today. Camille girl with a smile replied that she received a good sum for work, and with these words began to take out her purse to show her finances. Camille took out the money and handed it to Evelyn with words, "Here, take at least part of it. I suggest that tomorrow we go to the market together and buy some goodies. How about it?" The pensioner approached the girl and took the money. The old woman studied the bills for a long time and then asked her mockingly what was Camille's task today. Camille immediately sensed a trick in Evelyn's question. She answered that today she was collecting signatures for the advertisement. The old woman laughed and then, with a sharp movement, threw the money in the face of her ward with the words, "Who did you decide to deceive?" And after this phrase, the pensioner snatched from Camille's hands a bag from which to shake out the clothes. Evelyn picked up the fallen short skirt from the floor, as well as a blouse with a deep neckline. The older woman held out the clothes to the girl and said reproachfully, "This is your uniform. When you collect signatures from truckers, don't give me any more fairy tales. Wendy saw you today, driving down the highway with her husband. A neighbor told me you were wearing those clothes when you got into the truck. She also told me that her husband had seen you on the road before. By the way, he's been getting the same shit from you. That you were on a date. How could you do something like that? Tell me, don't you hate what you're doing? Can you imagine what your daughter will think of you when she finds out? I'm ashamed of what you're doing right now. It's like you stabbed me in the back. I didn't expect you to deceive me like that. You." Evelyn shoved things into Camille's hands. Camille and silently went to the kitchen, where she sat down at the table and not in a coffin and cried softly. Camille came in after her and tried to hug the older woman, but the latter pushed her away. The girl realized that she had caused her dear one unbearable heartache. She wanted to say something in her defense, but there were no words. Camille knelt down in front of Evelyn and spoke loudly. "It's my fault, and I admit it. I know I have offended you very much, and I have nothing to say for myself. Believe me, I did not go to the track for my own pleasure, but only to survive. Just don't pretend you're poor. There are plenty of single moms who find a way to make ends meet, and they don't go selling their bodies. Like you did, scold me with tears in my eyes directly killed Camille. I won't tell you anything else. I'll just leave now and try to forget that I ever met you. Small pennies. I'll pay you back. but we won't see each other anymore. And you can continue to go out for signatures on the highway," said the old woman and got up from the table. She wanted to take a step, but could not, for her knees were encompassed by Camille, who cried, sobbing profusely. For a few minutes the girl held Evelyn by the legs and then raised her face to the pensioner, and through her sobs said, "You may scold me with hurtful words. I bear it all. Just don't cut us out of your life. I promise you, on my knees, that I will never go out on the highway again. I don't know how I'll make a living yet, but believe me, I'll find a way. Just give me one chance. I beg you not to turn your back on us. You know very well that you're the only person we have close to us. I've only now realized what I can't lose. Believe me, I'm truly sorry for what I did. But I did not know how to get out of such a situation, when there is no money, sometimes even for bread. I just ask you to believe that the money I brought today, it was not earned in this way. It was given to me by a stranger who saved me from Stephen. And that man gave me a good admonition too, that if he ever sees me on the highway again, he will consider me a fallen woman. He said the right words to you. All right, baby, if you promise me it won't happen again, we'll stick together. We'll try to forget this month completely, like it never happened. Now go see your daughter. I think she's awake," quietly spoke the old woman and stroked the girl's head. In the evening of that day, when the Evelyn players had already left, Camille thought about life. She realized that she had made a promise to the pensioner, and the girl knew that she would keep her word in any case, even if she had to starve. And at the moment, Camille was concerned with another question: where to find a part-time job. Camille spent a long time in her thoughts, and when she looked at the clock, she was surprised that already at 0:00 the young woman came to her daughter and admired the baby. Then the girl shared the bed and lay down. And at that moment, for some reason, she remembered the departure of her neighbor. Now Camille understood why Wendy had treated her so dryly. Camille decided that she had to talk to the neighbor tomorrow. 10 days passed. Camille kept her promise to Evelyn. Now when the pensioner came to Camille, the girl went to look for a job. And soon she was lucky to get a job as a dishwasher in a kindergarten. The salary was small, but Camille was happy with the money, and the schedule suited her. Another week flew by and Camille had a day off. The young woman decided to take her child for a walk at lunchtime. She had already started to get things to dress. The doorbell rang. Camille was surprised by it, as she was not expecting anyone, and especially Evelyn knew that she had a day off today and did not come these days. The girl then thought that was right. A neighbor came over to chat and hurriedly opened the door. However, it was not Wendy who turned out to be the evening, but a stranger who held a gorgeous bouquet of pink roses and a large fluffy bear. Camille looked at the man with surprise and immediately recognized him as the man who had given her money for nothing. The landlady was embarrassed to see Stephen's partner and spoke crumpled. "Hello, you must be here for the debt. How did you find me? You have a way of keeping guests on the doorstep. I'm glad you remembered me, though. That means you left a good impression of me. I'm not used to letting strangers into my home." "Oh my goodness," the man exclaimed, and then went on. "We're the ones who don't know each other. Perhaps you don't remember my name, but I remember yours perfectly well because I heard your whole conversation with Stephen. Only after I heard what that man did to you, that I did not let him do it again. My name is Christopher, by the way. I remember Stephen calling you Christopher. All right, come on in, but I'm warning you right away, I don't have the money to pay you back at the moment. And one more thing, I don't do that trade anymore. If you'd like to collect your debt in this equivalent, I gave the money freely and from the bottom of my heart. I really wanted you to stop doing this business," said the man and handed the girl flowers and a toy, and then crossed the threshold. "But I don't understand why you came to me," the young woman asked in surprise. "That's an interesting question, but I will answer you now. Initially agree that you will not call me you. Otherwise I feel like an old man. I'm only 31 years old. Now to answer your question, When I saw you in the car, I was struck by your looks. Then I thought you'd disappear and all my thoughts of you would be gone. But as time went on, I kept thinking about you. Then I realized that Cupid's arrow had accidentally pierced my heart, and thus I stand beside you." After these words, the crying of a child was heard from the room. The young woman rushed into the room. She put the flowers and the toy on the bed and picked up her daughter in her arms. Following the mistress of the apartment followed the guest. The man looked at the little girl and softly said, "It seems to me that with a toy I hurried. You should have bought another set of rattles. Since your daughter is still a baby, you shouldn't have bought anything at all. By the way, my daughter's name is Vanessa. She's 5 months old. I forgot to ask you how you found me. Stephen gave me a beautiful name. He gave me the street, the house, the entrance. I had to find the apartment on my own." "Very interesting. Can you tell me why Stephen is a trucker? I mean, his father's not a poor man." "I'd be happy to share. He told me why it happened. But first I'd like you to offer me a seat." "That's what hospitable hostesses usually do," the man said with a smile. The young woman hummed with embarrassment and offered the guest a chair, while she sat down on the bed with the baby. The girl turned to Christopher and looked questioningly at the man. The guest realized that he was expected to answer, and so began his story from the narration of the new acquaintance. The landlady learned that Stephen's father's business had failed and had to take a large loan from the bank to restore his own business. However, the finances did not help. Eventually, the business went bust, and there was a debt to the bank. And then it was decided to sell Stephen's apartment to pay off the debt. The young man's father could not bear it all and died suddenly. Stephen was left without money for life, and he had nothing to pay for his studies at the institute. So the guy dropped out of college and got a job as a trucker. Christopher told all this while looking at Camille, who was listening attentively. When the man finished the story, the girl smiled mysteriously, which did not hide from the guest, and he asked, "You must be gloating." "Not at all. I just think that Stephen will now understand how to live on a simple salary and not boast about daddy's money." "You're right about that. Stephen is the sole earner in the family now, since his mother never worked after marrying his father. And from what I understand, my partner's mom isn't going to do it. But I'm not interested in that anymore." "Me neither. We were gonna go for a walk. Go with the duck. You won't mind that. So you're gonna tell me about yourself." And soon the couple and the baby were walking in the park. Christopher told the girl he lived in a one-room apartment. He has been working as a trucker for 6 years. He likes this occupation, and also said that he was married. But the family life did not work out. He said that he likes to guess Japanese crossword puzzles and dreams of visiting the Northern Territory in the future. Hearing the man's last wish, Camille laughed and said, "Everyone wants to go to the south, but you want to go to the north. You are strange. It's very simple. My parents are from there, and they often talk about it. If only you could hear how enthusiastically my mother and father described the north. Why am I telling you this now? I'll get to know them. You'll hear it firsthand. What makes you think I'm going to meet them? Wait a minute. Don't be so quick to say no. It's not like I'm asking you to get into bed. I just want to start by courting you. And if everything turns out well, then we can create a family with you in the future." From the lack of the young man, with a laugh uttered Camille. The couple walked with the child for a while, and then Christopher walked the girl home, helped her carry the stroller to the 3rd floor, and at parting asked permission to call and visit. The girl responded to the young man with consent. A month passed as Christopher visited Camille for the first time. During this time, the couple met several times. They often called each other. The man always inquired about Vanessa's accomplishments to the young woman at each call. It was a pleasure. It didn't take long to fly by. Another month, Camille came home from work and was surprised to hear someone in her apartment speaking in a man's voice. She listened and recognized Christopher's voice. The girl went into the room and saw the man talking sweetly with Evelyn. The old woman saw the girl and said with a smile that Camille had come to visit them. Camille looked at Christopher with surprise, and he immediately knelt down on one knee in front of Camille, took out a small box from the pocket of his jeans, which he opened and handed to the girl with the words, "Here I am making you a marriage proposal. I met Evelyn without your permission and told this worthy woman how I love you. She said she would bless us only after you gave your consent. Now my fate is in your hands." Camille looked at Evelyn, confused initially, and then shifted her gaze to the man. The girl took a box from which she pulled out a thin wedding ring. She slipped the piece of jewelry onto her finger and admired it, taking her hand aside, then looked at Christopher again and asked quietly, "What about my job at the track? That's what you gave me, isn't it? You're going to remind me of that someday, aren't you? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? I believe I met you in a more romantic setting, like the day I first walked into this apartment. Make it look like I got the wrong address. And by the way, Stephen is no longer my partner. I asked management to do that, and they'd gone along with it. Now I have a partner who is not considered for the girls. He's a model family man. That's what I'm going to be. As soon as you say yes, what can I tell you? Naturally, I say I want to be your wife," the girl said happily. And at the same moment she found herself in the arms of a man. Christopher tenderly kissed the young woman and quietly in her ear said, "You have now made me with the happiest person. I love you madly, and I will never hurt you or Anya. I will do everything possible so that you do not need anything. We will be a model family. And now you can't refuse to meet your relatives, who already know about you and are eagerly waiting for me to introduce you to them. I understand that you are preparing me to talk to my father and mother about the wonderful northern region, as well as hinting that we will have a joint trip to those lands. That's a good point. And you are not only beautiful, but also smart." Laughing, Christopher replied, and kissed the young woman on the lips.